I've been watching SpongeBob since I was a little baby boy, so I have a deep fondness for the show. I spend a good chunk of my time watching it, talking about it, reading it, and eating it. So today, I'll go over the first 15 seasons of the main show, the first 3 theatrical movies, the 2 Netflix films, all of Camp Coral, and the first 3 seasons of the Patrick Star Show. After I talk about each season in general, I'll go over both my least favorite and most favorite episode from that season. The reason I'm not doing the oh-so-popular rank every episode format is because that sounds really time-consuming and not really that fun to do. Besides, how else will I make the Pal for Gary video if I talk about it here? I need the content. I'm also not going to do eras like the Golden Age, because it's kind of pretentious. So with all that boring stuff out of the way, let's go over one of the longest running Nicktoons of all time. I can't wait to be 80 years old and have that sentence be outdated. During his time on Rocko's Modern Life, Stephen Hillenburg wanted to publish his comic, The Inner Tidal Zone, which he created while working at the Ocean Institute in Dana Point, California. The comic is meant to teach kids about tide pools and the animals that live in them. Tide pools are shallow pools of seawater that can range from inches to feet in terms of depth, and they're the home of animals that can easily adapt to these constant changes. Animals such as sea stars, crustaceans, and sponges can be found in tide pools. While the comic was used at the Ocean Institute, Hillenburg couldn't find a publisher that wanted the Inner Tidal Zone. Martin Olson, who was Hillenburg's co-worker on Rocko's Modern Life, read the Inner Tidal Zone and told Stephen he should make it into a series. So Hillenburg reworked the Inner Tidal Zone into something else, primarily focusing on the character Bob the Sponge, and his life in a tide pool. This sea sponge character, however, wouldn't be just a normal blobby sponge. He could do so many different things, and he'd be shaped like a kitchen sponge, which would fit his square personality. Hillenburg showed these sketches to his friends while he went out camping. And while Steve's friends thought he was great at animation, they thought that sponge he drew would stay in that sketchbook. After Rocko's Modern Life ended, Steve got together with creative director Derek Drybin, art director Nick Jennings, and writer and story editor Tim Hill to create the show Sponge Boy Ahoy. So after making the pitch Bible, they went up to Nickelodeon and pitched the show. They thought that they'd get a response in a few weeks, but the executives came back minutes later and greenlit the show. And thus, we were given SpongeBob SquarePants. They had to change the name. Since I'll be going over the show throughout the video, I figured it'd be better to do a real basic rundown of the 10 main characters the show uses, since they make up the backbone of the show. SpongeBob SquarePants is the overly optimistic, childish, naive, and somewhat bipolar Sponge, voiced by Tom Kenny, who alongside Jerry Lewis and Pee Wee Herman, served as inspiration for the character.
I pity the poor fool! Don't eat my cereal!
SpongeBob lives with his snail Gary in a pineapple under the sea in the town of Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob lives next door to his grouchy, pretentious, and downright rude neighbor, Squidward Tentacles, voiced by Roger Bumpus. Patrick Star, voiced by Bill Fagerbakke, is SpongeBob's dim-witted, lovable, yet easy to anger, and impulsive best friend. Sandy Cheeks, voiced by Carolyn Lawrence, is SpongeBob's only real normal friend, but is also athletic, an active thrill seeker, and a scientist. Mr. Krabs, voiced by Clancy Brown, is SpongeBob and Squidward's cheapskate boss at the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krab recognizes SpongeBob's talents as a fry cook and is more than willing to take advantage of him if need be.
Mr. Krabs, I can't believe I'm saying this, but how could you trade SpongeBob for 62 cents?
You think I could have gotten more?
Besides his daughter Pearl, voiced by Lori Allen, Mr. Krabs' one true love in life is money. Plankton, voiced by SpongeBob writer Mr. Lawrence, is Krabs' rival and resident evil mastermind. He's a smart yet impulsive creature whose one true goal in life is to steal the Krabby Patty's secret formula. Plankton is married to his wife Karen, voiced by Jill Talley. Karen is both a snarky housewife and Plankton's everything, as without Karen, Plankton is quite useless on his own.
Ow! What's the matter?
My eye is burning and I don't know why!
Blink.
Oh yeah, thanks for reminding me.
Mrs. Puff, voiced by Mary Jo Collette, is SpongeBob's nervous wreck of a driving instructor. The reason being is that SpongeBob's horrible driving causes her to either suffer greatly or face prison time as a result. SpongeBob has quite the main cast, but to tell a good story with SpongeBob, you don't need to use all 10 of the characters. In fact, just 4 can do wonders. Help Wanted is about SpongeBob wanting to be the new fry cook at the Krusty Krab. However, Mr. Krabs and Squidward think he's a clumsy oaf, so they send him on a wild goose chase. Things turn sour once buses of anchovies arrive, causing havoc in the restaurant.
Can we show a little decency and form a neat single file line in front of the register?
As a pilot, this does a good job explaining the characters, the dynamics, and the setting. It shows you that Patrick is dim-witted, yet a good friend to SpongeBob. It shows you that Squidward isn't fond of SpongeBob and doesn't like being around him. And it shows you that Mr. Krabs is a greedy bastard. But most importantly, it tells you who SpongeBob is as a character. He's optimistic, he's childish, and he's innocently naive. No matter what danger SpongeBob gets himself into, one of these three things, or even all three at once, helps him out of nearly any situation he ends up in. In his weird SpongeBob way, he's able to feed all the anchovies swiftly and prove to Mr. Krabs that he's a talented fry cook. And it's through a combination of these things that he's able to save the day. SpongeBob was, and still is, a very unique show, and it's no wonder why it caught on with so many different people. The show was so unique, it spawned its own imitators. And I almost forgot to mention this, but the art style and animation here is sublime. I love the simpler looking paintings, how bouncy the animation is, and the rougher character designs. Visually, this is just a very charming episode. While Help Wanted might not be the funniest episode of the series, as the show would go on to, improve, it's definitely the most iconic and influential episode of the entire SpongeBob franchise, and serves as a really strong introduction to the show. A solid 10 out of 10 in my book. Season 1 of SpongeBob is when the show was still trying to find its footing, since a few of the episodes in this season are about expanding the world and the main and secondary cast, like Ripped Pants, introducing Larry the Lobster, Pickles, introducing Bubble Bass, voiced by D. Bradley Baker, Scaredy Pants, introducing the Flying Dutchman, voiced by Brian Doyle Murray.
A lot of this.
Oh, well that's doable. How many boogers we talking about?
Not boogers, dollars, you moron!
And Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy.
Stop shouting that napping!
It's not me, old coot!
Which introduces Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, voiced by Ernest Borgnine and Tim Conway.
I'm too sexy for my shirt. Too sexy for my shirt. So sexy it hurts.
So I can say that some of this season is more story-focused than joke-focused, but it's still very joke-focused.
Whoa, Squidward, you're choking!
The humor in this season is a mix of surrealism, Looney Tunes type slapstick, wordplay, and it has a unique sense of innocence and realism to it. The pacing and timing is a bit slower compared to the next few seasons of the show, which I want to say makes it calmer, but you can't really call SpongeBob calm. I definitely do think this season could have benefited from a much faster pace, but it's not that much of a detriment for me. It's more so like, whatever. I give season 1 a solid 9 out of 10 simply because it's still trying to figure itself out, but it's a real strong season and a very funny one at that. Nature Pants is about SpongeBob leaving his normal life to be a jellyfish in Jellyfish Fields. The concept of this episode is something I don't really like. Having SpongeBob give up everything he's worked for and owns feels really out of character for him. Like, I can't imagine him quitting the Krusty Krab. I can't imagine him just giving up everything he owns. It doesn't really make that much sense to me. Even with him at the end realizing what he did was stupid, it's still kind of hard to believe that, he'd even do this in the first place. But besides SpongeBob being out of character, this is still a really funny episode.
Here, use this!
But I just can't get behind SpongeBob doing any of this. Like, I get that he's childish and everything, but still, I feel like there's some things SpongeBob wouldn't do. This is an interesting plot, though. I feel like they could have done it in a way where it still stayed true to SpongeBob's character, and, still have him live with a jellyfish. Also, this is the only real time I'll use being out of character as an excuse for these sort of things, because regardless of any season of SpongeBob in my opinion, all but 2 of the main characters have been really consistent. I think an actual shift in character would be like Stewie from Family Guy, where he went from being the evil baby to the gay genius baby. Probably not the best way to say it, but you get the idea. As for the episode, it's a funny one, but it's one that I just can't really gel with. Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost is about SpongeBob and Patrick thinking they killed Squidward while playing one of their games, and volunteer to be the ghostly slaves of who they think is Squidward's ghost, who in reality is just Squidward messing with them. The escalation in what happens is what really makes this episode great, which is heightened even more since the episode's conflict is kicked off with SpongeBob and Patrick thinking they killed their friend. You'd think the whole episode would be just Squidward bossing SpongeBob and Patrick around for 11 minutes, which is already a funny concept, but them doing a 180 by having the ever-so-naive SpongeBob and Patrick attempt to put Squidward to rest makes this episode way funnier.
Okay, get in.
Are you crazy? I'm not getting in that thing.
But you said we could put you to rest.
And I think what makes this episode better is that they do this ending that's treated as like a heartwarming moment where they're sending Squidward up to the great beyond, and in reality, Squidward's being sent to his death, and that's really funny.
He's in a better place.
I have no problems making this my favorite Season 1 episode.
Oh, look, the mourners have arrived.
Oh, Squidward. We all came as soon as we were sure you were dead.
Season 2 is an improvement from Season 1. It's faster paced and near completely joke focused, save for specials here and there. Visually though, this season is really all over the place early on. You got some episodes that look like a digital Season 1, and then you got episodes that stick really closely to the storyboards. Over time it does get a lot more visually consistent, and I assume the reason why it flip-flops between this is due to the board artists getting used to the new model sheets. I just thought it was a funny thing to bring up. And speaking of funny, this is a very funny season.
Gary! There's a bomb strapped to my chest!
You took my only food! Now I'm gonna starve!
Oh my god, you're a raunchy old woman! All those years with Grandpa really made you a dirty bitch!
And since it's faster paced, it makes the jokes feel near rapid fire in some cases. Sometimes there's a bump in the road, and a joke doesn't land, but that's very few and far between here. I give Season 2 a nice, wet, and sloppy 10 out of 10. Also, praise aside, I know the season's good and everything, but I wouldn't call it the second coming of Christ. If you know, you know. Dumped is about Gary leaving SpongeBob to go live with Patrick, and with SpongeBob trying to deal with the fallout of breaking up with his pet snail. Unfortunately, this was a really easy pick as a least favorite. The jokes in this episode don't really land most of the time, which kinda sucks because the idea of SpongeBob having to deal with a breakup in his own SpongeBob way has potential to be a funny plot, but what they did here kinda makes it boring. It sucks too because there are some funny jokes in this episode.
Gosh, Larry sure is different than Gary. And Gary and Larry are real different than Jerry.
I just wish this was a better episode, all things considered. It does get better when SpongeBob starts going through different pets, and maybe if that was the entire episode, maybe I wouldn't find it as boring, but as it stands, this episode is just kind of a dump. Dying for Pie is about Squidward being a dick during Employee Brotherhood Day, so when he has to make SpongeBob a gift, he instead buys a pie, which unbeknownst to him, is a bomb. After Squidward and Mr. Krabs find out that it's a bomb, they soon discover the pie to be missing, believing SpongeBob might have eaten it. So after Squidward discovers guilt for the first time, he decides to give SpongeBob the best last day ever. This episode is a masterclass in both comedy and visuals, which work really well together, like chocolate and peanut butter, the best diabetic combination. This is one of those early Season 2 episodes that stick really closely to the boards, so the expressions here are really great. The jokes here are fantastic. Not a lot of kid shows opt to do on-screen open heart surgery. And the whole montage of Squidward and SpongeBob completing the list is probably one of my favorite moments in this episode. I love all the creative gags they do, including the open heart surgery. I also really like how at the end, Squidward really wanted SpongeBob to explode. Guess Squidward needs a reason to be nice to SpongeBob. Great episode. If someone says Squidward is relatable, they're probably an asshole. Just saying. Season 3 is probably my favorite early SpongeBob season because it feels like they really knew what they wanted to do with SpongeBob, with it feeling that they finally have everything on lock, and that leads to really great episodes.
What's a gorilla doing underwater in the first place?
Well, it's funny you should... see, George, they're onto us!
Let's get out of here.
Season 3 compared to Season 2 is a little bit more cynical.
Next time you see me, this town will be eating out of the palm of my hand. Spare change. Spare change, ma'am.
But it's still funny regardless. And I know it's a bit of a cop-out to say this, but I didn't really have a problem with any of the episodes here. In fact, this is the first season in this video to not have a least favorite section. But flat out removing a section I feel would mess with the pacing of this video, so I'll discuss my second favorite episode of the season instead. I give Season 3 a 10 out of 10. Krabby Land is about SpongeBob celebrating the first day of summer break, which Mr. Krabs joins in on, as kids spend more of their parents' money during said break. But luck isn't on Krabs' side when the kids become no-shows. So after spying on children at a nearby playground,
So weak and malnourished.
Mr. Krabs realizes that he needs to build one himself in order to take the innocent kids' money. This is a nostalgic episode for me because I remember watching it all the time on my Season 3 DVD. But regardless of the nostalgia, this is still a very funny episode. Mr. Krabs easily steals the show here because not only does he build the death trap that is Krabby Land, we're also introduced a fan-favorite SpongeBob character, Crabby the Clown.
Hey, kids! Thank you all for coming! Thank you! Eat plenty of Krabby Patties!
SpongeBob here is also really good, and I like how he comes to the conclusion that he needs to beat the shit out of himself just so he can entertain the children.
Hey, kids, check this out.
There's just a lot of great gags here that end up being back-to-back with how they're told. The ending itself is also fantastic. Not because it's a satisfying way to end the episode by having Mr. Krabs get his comeuppance, but because we got one of the best songs out of it as a result.
Green stuff! Gotta get some of that green stuff!
Ooh.
Green stuff! Gotta get some of that green stuff!
Yeah, he's got the green light, go! He's about to show you fishes what he means by dough!
Can You Spare a Dime is about Mr. Krabs accusing Squidward of stealing his precious first dime, causing Squidward to quit and deciding to follow his dreams. But Squidward's a loser, so he quickly becomes a homeless bum. SpongeBob decides to take care of Squid Bum, only for his kindness to get taken advantage of really quickly. This episode is really unique because I think this is the first time they tried switching the SpongeBob and Squidward dynamic around, by having Squidward being the one that annoys SpongeBob. And I know it's cliche to say this, everybody who's talked about this episode says this, but SpongeBob losing his shit at both Squidward and Mr. Krabs is really funny to me.
Because when I need a job done, I get someone with a job to do that job!
What are you saying?
There's a lot of great jokes in this episode.
Donate to the children's fund? Why? What have children ever done for me?
But here, I think the banter between the characters is very strong, making it a real highlight of the episode. The conversation Squidward and Mr. Krabs have over whether or not Squidward stole Krabs' dime is fantastic. And I really like how equally stubborn they are. It makes the whole scene really great. The biggest highlight, and probably my favorite scene in the episode, is SpongeBob desperately and angrily telling Squidward to get a job without directly saying it. This is a fantastic episode.
'Cause you and me, we're like brothers, only closer.
The SpongeBob SquarePants movie is about Plankton framing Mr. Krabs for stealing Neptune's crown. So in order to prevent Mr. Krabs from dying at the hands of Neptune himself, SpongeBob and Patrick go on a quest to get Neptune's crown back and save Mr. Krabs' life. The first SpongeBob movie is easily one of the best show-to-film movies I've ever seen. And it's at the very tippy top of my list of favorite animated features, right below Day the Earth Blew Up.
I see what you're looking at. Boy, does that look delicious. I bet you want a piece of that, huh, buddy?
The film is loosely based on Homer's Odyssey, as well as being a parody of adventure movies as a whole.
Or some other third thing can make me anything more than what I really am inside. A kid.
That's great. Now get back against the wall.
But that's okay.
What? What's going on?
The film never really takes itself seriously, and I love that. Even in the scene where the main characters are dying on screen, they find a way to make it just a very funny scene. And when they do end up dying, the tension is broken by a bunch of grown adults dressed up as pirates crying about the death of SpongeBob. It's both absurd and really funny at the same time. The humor this movie has would later go on to set the stage for season 4 of the show, but I'll go more into that later. But let's not forget the visuals now. It's practically eye candy. This is easily the best these characters have ever looked in 2D. Like the colors, the drawings, the little details they add, like how there's more bubbles, or how Sandy's helmet has a slight gradient, all add up to making this a very visually appealing movie. I do see people say that this movie could have used the other main characters like Sandy or Squidward a bit more, but truth be told, this isn't their story, it's SpongeBob and Patrick's. The whole movie is about them learning that it's okay to be a kid, and it probably would have just muddied the film if like Sandy went with them or something. But as for characters that are important to the film, Dennis makes a great foil to SpongeBob and Patrick here, because you've never really seen an actual threat go up against these characters before, which adds another aspect I like about this film. This is the first time SpongeBob and Patrick really left their bubble, so to speak, into the most dangerous adventure they ever had. And the stuff they go through this film really tests SpongeBob's optimism, childish behavior, and even his innocence. When SpongeBob gives up, you can really feel that he's at the end of his rope regarding their adventure up to that point. And for being such a wacky character, he makes the sensible decision to give up. And I think it does a good job showing how much SpongeBob's been whittled down by this adventure. But once he thinks he's a man now, all those qualities like his innocence, his childish, his naivety, it all comes back full force because he believes that he's a man and can, do all of this. Only to get taken away by Dennis later on. Now on the end of his rope again, and on his deathbed no less, SpongeBob realizes that they really did make it to Shell City. Not as men, but as kids. And as SpongeBob dies, he slowly regains his optimism, his childish behavior, even his innocence, and learns that being a kid is okay. And once he comes back to life, all of those qualities are back full force, and he remains like this throughout the entirety of the film. The way this film plays with SpongeBob's core as a character is just very well done, and it takes his character to places that we've never seen it before. There's also a lot of parallels between this movie and Help Wanted. Both are about SpongeBob wanting to prove himself against an opposing force, so he sets off to do what's asked of him. And he's able to return and save the day in his own SpongeBob way. And I think it's kind of beautiful that SpongeBob's first adventure and his biggest adventure are kind of one and the same. And with how good this movie is, and with how big SpongeBob was at the time, you can really see how SpongeBob became the juggernaut it is today. With its really expensive Hot Topic board games, or meme merchandise, or Dave singles with slightly spicy sauce. Look, I get why it was a Dave single, but couldn't you have done something more interesting? Like, yeah, a Dave single tastes good, whatever. Like, I don't want a fucking Dave single, I want a fucking Krabby Patty. The soundtrack for this movie also features a variety of different bands, the most notable standouts being the Flaming Lips, who also did the Duck Dodgers theme.
Did you used to drive a black Camaro?
Dodger's friend.
And Ween, a band that heavily influenced SpongeBob as a whole. And they even got to do a song for season 2. And as for the soundtrack as a whole, it's baller. It's a really great soundtrack. And truth be told, I just love every aspect about this movie. So the SpongeBob SquarePants movie gets a very predictable 10 out of 10. If the SpongeBob movie was like the Jimmy Neutron movie, and it was the start of the whole show, Season 4 would be the first season of that show. During the first movie, Nick decided to order around 10 episodes for a new season.
Well, the big thing right now is Paul, I should mention Paul Tibbett, is after I did the movie, Paul came in and basically has been running the show kind of in my shoes. And
did you just need a rest at that point, you think?
I felt like it's time for new blood. Mm-hmm. And I think it's good to change things up, to keep it fresh. And, I'm a producer on the show, and I still look at everything.
For a basic rundown, Hillenburg decided to take a step down from the show, so he just became an executive producer, and he let his longtime friend Paul Tibbett become a showrunner. A handful of crew members from season 3 went on to work on Camp Laszlo, except for Dan Povenmire, he went the Family Guy route, which paved the way for new writers and board artists to get their hands on the show, leading to a very great season.
Writing genius! What a genius make an illegal U-turn through an orphanage!
They ran for it in time. What are you so mad about?
The first few episodes of this season are a lot more in tone with the first movie, both visually and in terms of humor. The season does somewhat transition into its own thing later on, but despite every change they did, it's still a very funny season of the show, and it gets a big 10 out of 10. Enemy-in-Law is about Plankton hooking up with Krabs' mom because he's grown tired of Karen. Ew. Mr. Krabs obviously disapproves of the relationship, assuming Plankton's only doing it to get the secret formula, which is a family recipe in this episode. And so Plankton decides to change course just a teensy little bit. This episode is weird, and not a good weird, more like a why would you do this weird. Plankton hooking up with Mrs. Krabs is kind of a nasty-ass thing to do in an episode. What did Plan Z do to you? Now, during season 1, I mentioned that 2 characters actually changed over time, as opposed to the rest of the main cast, which have been fairly consistent over the years. Those 2 characters are Karen and Plankton. This is the first season to have Plankton and Karen as main characters, because before then, Plankton was a bit less three-dimensional, and Karen wasn't a character yet beyond being snarky and intelligent. And frankly, I don't view Plankton leaving Karen in this episode as an issue, simply because this is something Plankton at the time would do. And in fact, they did another episode like this, which I find a lot funnier, but that's besides the point. I only bring this up because it kind of shows how much Plankton has evolved over the years, because I could not imagine the modern Plankton doing any of this. They made a lot of episodes as of late that make Karen and Plankton a much more lovey-dovey couple than they ever been in the earlier seasons. But no, my main issue with this episode is why the fuck is Plankton going after Krabs' mom? Like, forget about Freak Bob, we have Freak Ton over here. And with all the silliness out of the way, I just didn't find the episode super funny. Like, there were jokes I liked, but some of the jokes here just didn't quite land for me that much. It's an okay episode, and I could see why people like it, but it just didn't click for me, One thing I did like about this episode was longtime SpongeBob voice actor Serena Irwin becoming the new voice of Mrs. Krabs, since I think she fits the role pretty well. And honestly, I don't know if Paul Tibbett Mrs. Krabs can really carry a whole episode.
Go to your room, mister. You're grounded for the rest of the night.
Yes, Mommy.
The Lost Mattress is about how after seeing Mr. Krabs in pain from his lumpy old mattress, SpongeBob and Patrick decide to buy him a new one, with Squidward taking all the credit. But since Mr. Krabs' old mattress had all of his money, this plunges him into a cash coma. So the crew have to go fetch Mr. Krabs' old mattress, or else Squidward is sent to jail. This episode is like an Uzi in the joke department, to the point where almost every line is a funny joke or gag.
All my money was in that mattress!
What? Haven't you ever heard of a bank?
No!
Mr. Krabs!
No! And we got you a card. Is there money in it? Nope.
It really harkens back to Season 2's pacing. The story also goes to a lot of hilarious places, leading into this episode having a lot of great moments as a result, like Squidward getting mauled, Krabs getting abused in the hospital, and SpongeBob and Patrick dressing up as steaks.
We're choice cuts!
In fact, I'd say Squidward's a highlight in of himself, since he does a really good job being an arrogant piece of shit here, and, we love Squidward for that. Honestly, out of all my favorites in this video, if I really had to pick my all-time favorite episode of SpongeBob, this episode would be a strong contender.
If you don't get Mr. Krabs' mattress back from the dump, I am going to help you do it myself.
Wow, he really does care.
Season 5 is more or less a transitional point from Season 4 to Season 6.
Plus, look at what we unearthed! A UFO!
The only other highlights I could give is that Nickelodeon forced the crew into making an 11-minute episode into a TV movie that ate at the show's budget. But at least the special was good, so there's that. This season also has the most Burger King toys based on its specials. Yeah, there's nothing to really talk about with this season. It's a funny season, but it doesn't really push the envelope, so to speak. So I'll give this season a 9 out of 10, because I really don't think it warrants a higher number than that. Breath of Fresh Squidward is about Squidward accidentally electrocuting himself and turning into a better SpongeBob, much to the annoyance of the actual SpongeBob. I believe this is their second attempt at flipping the SpongeBob and Squidward dynamic, but it doesn't really do the concept justice here. I think it would have been better to have SpongeBob get electrocuted too, and turn into Squidward fully like how he does at the end, but I do get why SpongeBob would get mad here. He has a history of not liking copycats, but I don't think he was the right character to get mad, and I know he's portrayed as being in the wrong in this episode, and he goes out of his way to apologize, but seeing new Squidward get so sad makes me feel bad for him, like they did too good of a job making SpongeBob a dick here. I think the episode Pat Hard Squid does this concept better, because I feel like it'd make more sense for Squidward of all characters to get mad at someone copying him and doing a better job. And plus, we get to see them swap personalities, and that's a really funny scene in that episode. This isn't a bad episode by any means, but I'd rather someone watch Pat Hard Squid over this episode. But if you really want to watch this one, then that's fine, go watch it. Friend or Foe is about after a near-successful attempt to steal the Krabby Patty secret formula, SpongeBob finally asks why Plankton hates Mr. Krabs so much. So Mr. Krabs explains that Plankton and him used to be best friends in their youth, and goes on to explain how they became enemies in the first place. Since this is a 22-minute episode, the story is a bigger focus than a typical 11-minute episode. And the story they tell here is a really good one. I really like getting to know more about the character's history, since we don't really get episodes revolving around the main character's past all that much. And another aspect I liked about the story was Mr. Krabs and Plankton being unreliable narrators towards the end. And I love how dramatic they make their endings be, only for Karen to show how mundane it actually was in real life. And since it's a more story-focused episode, that doesn't mean it's not a funny episode, and the animated bits here really do have a lot of funny jokes.
It would be an honor if you'd be the first to try our delicious burgers.
Why, I'd be happy to.
Yay! Crab Patties KO Old Man J.
And I say animated bits because this episode has one of my favorite characters of the show, Patchy the Pirate. So for the Patchy side of things, it's about Patchy getting a job as a fry cook so he could be more like his hero, SpongeBob SquarePants. Unlike SpongeBob, however, Patchy is a terrible fry cook.
Customers love me cooking. Why, we're almost out of doggy bags.
And things get more rocky when Potty is soon promoted to assistant manager with the power of his GED.
A little thing called a GED, my man.
The Patchy segments here, as opposed to the Friend or Foe segments, are purely comedy, so it helps the episode out a bit more given that the animated bits are more focused on story. And I think having Patchy do goofy stuff like this is a good direction to take these segments. Sure, Patchy is funny just hosting stuff, but it's a lot funnier to have Patchy be a bumbling man-child that mucks everything up. One of my favorite things about this episode is seeing how much of a terrible cook Patchy is. The burgers Patchy makes here are clearly inedible and contaminated with like rats and shit, so it's funny seeing Patchy thinking he's doing a good job, but then in reality he's, doing piss poor at his job. And this episode has one thing SpongeBob can never mess up, a gorilla joke.
What? They let a smelly, hairy flea bag like that serve food?
This season, I feel, is when the new blood Hillenburg talked about all the way back in Season 4 fully kicked in. Because the best way I can describe Season 6 is that Season 5 walked so that Season 6 could run.
Patrick, is that you?
What?
I said, is that that you?
I can't hear you! It's too dark in here!
Besides keeping the best parts of Season 4 and 5, Season 6 also introduces a lot of dry humor. And honestly, the dry humor works really well with the slower pacing this season has. And with this combination in mind, it leads to this season having a lot of great banter amongst the characters. Not that the earlier seasons didn't have great banter, but it's one of the focal points here more than any other season prior.
It goes in like steel wool, but comes out like an angel from heaven.
Please, tell me more.
Oh, well, this one time
Not really.
I didn't think so.
This season also has the first widescreen episode of SpongeBob, Truth or Square, which is also the first time the show made an anniversary special. And it's the better one out of the two. So I believe that Season 6 deserves a scrumptious 10 out of 10. Clash of Triton is about King Neptune celebrating his 5,000th birthday at the Krusty Krab, but he's sad about his son Triton that he disowned. So SpongeBob decides to free Triton from his prison in hopes of giving Neptune a happy birthday. This is a boring episode. Not completely boring, I did find quite a bit of stuff funny here, but it's easily the weakest of the season. According to Vincent Waller, a lot of the funnier stuff in this special was cut due to time constraints, and honestly, I feel like that did have quite a bit of an impact on this episode. I also didn't find Triton that great of a character. He's not really funny, and I don't really find him that interesting, to be honest. As an example with Mindy in the first SpongeBob movie, she wasn't a funny character either, but she was an interesting character, as she's the complete opposite of her father, King Neptune. Well, you know, different Neptune, who's a bumbling king that has no regard for sea life. But unlike her father, Mindy's smart and loves the creatures of the sea, and it's her compassion and kindness towards SpongeBob that helps both kickstart his and Patrick's adventure, and leads them to save the day. It's probably unfair to compare a character from an hour-long film to a character in a 22-minute episode, but I feel like they could have tried to do something more interesting beyond like, oh dad, I found the cure for cancer. Fuck you, son. Oh, well, I hate you, Dad. I'm killing everyone. Besides that, the main cast is funny, and Neptune's a funny character too, but it's not enough to make me go back to this episode often. Pineapple Fever is about SpongeBob and Patrick preparing for an upcoming storm, but their loudness annoys Squidward, who chastises them for being too annoying. But the storm outside forces Squidward to spend time with the people he hates the most. The first half does a really great job showing off post-movie's dry humor, a good example being SpongeBob and Patrick preparing for the storm.
SpongeBob, this seems like a strange time to start decorating.
You, sir, obviously do not recognize fine decorating when you see it.
And later on, when the main three are playing really basic board games and everyone but Squidward is treating them really seriously, like them questioning if Squidward winning tic-tac-toe was legitimate or not, or telling Squidward that he cheated by telling Patrick where the last jigsaw piece goes. The second half is dedicated to more absurdist humor, like Squidward crossing his own border to raid SpongeBob's fridge, leading into a more primal caveman fight than anything out of SpongeBob BC. This episode also shows off a lot of great expressions from these characters. I mean, look at these faces. They're funny as shit. This episode is a must-watch, at least in my opinion. Season 7, in a lot of ways, is like Season 6, but unlike Season 6, the animation is a bit more stilted than before, and I can't really put my finger on it, but visually, it's slightly different from Season 6. Like, it's enough for me to tell the difference between the two, but, you know, I don't know how to explain it. We also have the first mini-series, Legends of Bikini Bottom, which is about, you know, the legends in Bikini Bottom.
How original.
Since this season doesn't push the envelope that much like the season before, I'll give it a 9 out of 10. Also, if you're curious about the Burger King toys, it's tied with Season 6. The main drain is about SpongeBob and Patrick being told a story by Mr. Krabs about two friends pulling the ocean's main drain. Finding the story interesting, SpongeBob and Patrick set off to find the main drain themselves to see if it's real, much to the dismay of Mr. Krabs and Plankton. This isn't a bad episode, but it's both not that funny and not that memorable. Besides Patrick pulling out his baby tooth, of course, that was pretty funny. But given how it's not that funny of an episode, it leads to the episode feeling rather sluggish because this season has pretty slow pacing like before. The twist of Mr. Krabs and Plankton being the ones that pulled the drain was kinda cool, but the twist that the whole thing was a story was, you know, kinda less cool. There's not really anything I could say here besides, like, I wish it was better. Yeah, that's good. Squidward in Clarinet Land is about Squidward wanting to keep his clarinet safe for his most important recital ever. So Mr. Krabs brings in an old locker from his old Navy days.
Goodies news!
Who's that, Mr. Krabs?
That appears to be Corporal Sterling, lad. Forgot all about that prank.
SpongeBob decides to spruce it up a little bit and store Squidward's clarinet inside the locker. After a while, Squidward soon sees how much sprucing up SpongeBob did and finds himself running off with his clarinet. So Squidward chases after SpongeBob into a mysterious new world. This episode starts off as a usual Season 7 episode, and a very funny one at that, but you could tell by the title of this episode that this is a loose parody of Alice in Wonderland, with Squidward as Alice and SpongeBob as that like white rabbit guy. I didn't read the fucking book. As well as being revealed that all of this is a dream, or a hallucination in Squidward's case. This is one of the more visually appealing episodes of the show, since you see Squidward go through a variety of different rooms, being maimed and mocked to get his clarinet back. Which, in turn, I like Clarinet Land being more fucked up than wacky. Like, if this episode was done later on in the show, they definitely make it a bit more like Random Land, but personally, I like middle season SpongeBob taking the more fucked up direction. Cause you know, it's funny when they do fucked up things. I feel this episode negates a pretty overused criticism I see get thrown at middle season SpongeBob, where Squidward is quote-unquote treated badly for no good reason, going as far to call it torture porn. How mature. But this episode clearly sets Squidward in the wrong because he fucking yells at a baby for drooling. Like, what the fuck are you doing, Squidward? Piece of shit. And because of that, you don't really feel bad for Squidward going through all this bullshit, simply because he's an asshole that deserves it. But yada yada, I found this episode funny, hoot and a holler, great episode. Season 8 is identical to Season 7, but they do a bit more Krusty Krab episodes here, which, you know, I don't mind. We also have the second and last miniseries the show did, called SpongeBob's Runaway Road Trip, which is about the main cast showing slides about the vacations they've been on. Season 8 also introduced holiday-themed stop-motion specials the show occasionally does from time to time, starting with this season's It's a SpongeBob Christmas. This is also the last season of the show to have cartoon genius Aaron Springer, as after this season, he'd go on to work at Disney, and even made his own show, Billy Dilly Super Duper Subterranean Summer. Aaron wrote a lot of my favorite episodes of SpongeBob, and I really love his style of comedy and art direction. And given how this is his last season on the show, I thought I'd give him some kudos. But back on track, since Season 8 is more or less the same as Season 7, I'll give it a 9 out of 10 too. As for Burger King toys, it's tied with Season 4 in last place. The Good Krabby name is about Mr. Krabs finding out that 2% of Bikini Bottom has never eaten at the Krusty Krab. So SpongeBob, with the help of Patrick, advertises the Krusty Krab all over Bikini Bottom in the most destructive way possible. This is kinda the same boat as Main Drain. The episode isn't really all that memorable, but unlike Main Drain, I did find a few more jokes here that were pretty funny.
Boy, I'm not sure what it is, but I feel like there's something in the air. Today's the day I finally get a Krabby Patty.
But like Main Drain, this was a pretty slow episode to get through. I'm not against these seasons being at a slower pace. If anything, it's a positive because it adds more to the comedy, but when an episode isn't really up there in terms of comedy, the slowness quickly changes into a negative. I really wish they did more with this episode because it is a funny concept. Maybe if it was about them advertising outside of Bikini Bottom, it'd be more interesting, but as it stands, it makes for pretty good background noise. Mermaid Man Begins is about SpongeBob and Patrick getting ready to watch the Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy origin special, but Mother Nature knocks out their power, so they decide to ask the real Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy about their origins, and how they became protectors of the deep. I really like what Season 7 and 8 did with Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, because it really upped the ante on the campy superhero type stuff that they were doing beforehand in earlier seasons. So much so that they got Adam West Batman and Burt Ward Robin to voice them in Back to the Past. This episode is chock full of that superhero weirdness. The fake origin story the duo tell is somewhat accurate to the more weirder type of superhero origin stories, where a lot of bullshit just happens and that's how they get their powers. Like here, Mermaid Man is given a magical sea star to breathe underwater, and Barnacle Boy can breathe underwater because Mermaid Man shoved his lungs full of barnacles. And since they're the only two humans under the sea, they decide to become a crime-fighting duo. Like, this is the type of stuff you'd expect from like a wacky superhero origin story. I think the best part is when the origin story that Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy tell quickly devolves into them having a petty argument, and it gets interrupted by the real origin story. Now, I'm not a savvy superhero guy, but the real origin story doesn't really feel like superhero bullshit. It feels like pure SpongeBob bullshit, and it's beautiful. The best part is that despite all the weird stuff Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy went through, it's the overcooked popcorn that makes them into aquatic-themed superheroes. This is one bizarre, fucked up piece of fiction, and I wholeheartedly believe that this scene is one of the best moments to ever come out of the show. This episode is definitely a must-watch. There's also a man that kind of looks like Dan Povenmire. Season 9 is the first widescreen season of the show, and while I did find a small few of the episodes pretty dull, this is a very consistently funny season. It's kind of business as usual. I will say though, it's nice seeing a bit more variety with the plots considering how Season 8, like I said earlier, did a lot of Krusty Krab episodes. So it's nice to see episodes like License to Milkshake or Safe Deposit Crabs that have really creative setups and settings. So despite having a dud here and there, I feel a respectable 8 out of 10 is in order for this season. It Came from Goo Lagoon is about strange purple goo bubbles seeping from Goo Lagoon, and everyone but Sandy has fun with it, with Plankton deciding to use these goo bubbles to steal the Krabby Patty's secret formula. Now it's up to Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick to stop Plankton from succeeding. This episode drags its feet, which isn't made better by the fact that it's a 22-minute special. Now don't get me wrong, there were some jokes I liked.
Squidward, it's an emergency! I'm gonna need your bike! Hop on, SpongeBob!
But some of the jokes just didn't really land for me a whole lot. Besides Plankton and Squidward, they're consistently funny here. Other than that, this was unfortunately a pretty dull episode in my opinion. It didn't need to be 22 minutes either, it easily could have just been 11. There's a Season 8 episode called The Krabby Patty That Ate Bikini Bottom, and it's similar to this episode, but when you know it, it's funnier and it's 11 minutes. Obviously, It Came from Goo Lagoon isn't a bad episode, but compared to the Krabby Patty That Ate Bikini Bottom, it makes this episode feel a lot less justified in being 22 minutes long, as well as even more unjustified in not being as funny. Overall, if you want to watch this episode, go watch the Krabby Patty That Ate Bikini Bottom instead. Boy, if I had a nickel every time I had to recommend a similar yet better episode. Jailbreak is about Plankton recently being incarcerated in the Bikini Bottom jail, where he soon realizes that his reputation in Chum has built him quite the cult following. So he decides to use his new gang to break out of jail and steal the Krabby Patty's secret formula. The idea of criminals using Chum for committing crimes is very interesting, and I find it funny that Plankton is just disappointed that they didn't actually eat the Chum, but you know, since they were using it for crime, he quickly comes around. SpongeBob as a prison guard was also a fun idea. I kinda wish it was utilized a bit more, but as it is, it's still rather funny. My favorite jokes in particular are Karen thinking Plankton's a bad baker for wanting a file in his cake, and Plankton making Chum like toilet wine. And who could forget two members of Plankton's gang getting a guard to sniff chloroform, which I'm not even sure how the fuck they were allowed to get away with that. Plankton, as expected, is very great in this episode. He has a lot of great zingers, jokes, hooplas, you know, you name it.
Are we near the airport?
This is both a funny episode and a good example of this season trying to do more variety. The SpongeBob movie Sponge Out of Water is about the secret formula magically disappearing out of nowhere during one of Plankton's schemes. But it actually wasn't out of nowhere, as Burgerbeard, a pirate in the surface world, uses a magical overdue library book that can change reality to steal the formula and create his very own food truck business. The town assumes Plankton was behind the disappearance of the formula, with SpongeBob being the only one that believes Plankton because he was there when the formula disappeared. So everyone in town assumes the two are working together the whole time to steal the formula, turning them into outlaws. Since Krabby Patties are also what keeps society held together in Bikini Bottom due to everyone's dependence on them, the town is thrust into the apocalypse. Now it's up to the unlikely duo of SpongeBob and Plankton to work together to both get the formula back and save Bikini Bottom. I have a lot of nostalgia for Sponge Out of Water because this is the first SpongeBob movie I got to see in theaters, which, you know, I hope that changes soon. But I'll admit, This movie is a bit of a mess since it does way too many things in its story while also being the same length as the first movie. You have the war stuff, the apocalypse stuff, the burger beard stuff, the time traveling stuff, and oh, we're on the surface stuff, and oh, the superhero stuff, and whatever the fuck they did with Bubbles. But what I'm trying to say is that it's not a very standard movie plot, and I think that does add to the charm of this movie. It's both weird and distinctly SpongeBob, but it does leave the film feeling a bit cluttered. Had they done more story beats on top of the existing ones, that's probably when I'd start viewing it as a detriment. A good example of this being the third movie's original alien cat plot. With that, it feels like they did way too much, like Gary being an alien, Nicolas Cage as president, more bubble shit, Mr. Krabs apparently pretending to be SpongeBob, alien cats that want to turn the earth into a litter box, and for some reason, SpongeBob and Patrick going to hell. It's just way too much and it kind of stops feeling like a SpongeBob story at that point. Lucky for us, the second movie hits a good balance while still feeling uniquely SpongeBob. This film's humor is still dry humor like the last 4 seasons we've looked at.
Now all we have to do is build it. Oh, no you don't.
Hey, my pitch pipe.
I need it for the time machine.
Oh, okay.
Installed!
But it also incorporates more slapstick gags, which we would get later on in the next season. Burger Beard is great too.
All right, let's do this. Bare knuckles. Bring it on, Skinny. You don't scare me.
You got any sevens?
Goldfish!
He's a very funny villain, and his scenes feel like if Patchy segments had a theatrical-sized budget, which makes sense because he was originally going to be Patchy, but I think this was a change for the better because I can't imagine Patchy being the antagonist in any SpongeBob story. The animation in this movie, both 2D and 3D, are really good, and while it's not as beautiful as the first film or the third film, it's still really great animation that portrays these characters really well. The stop motion they used here is great too. Screen Novelties never misses with SpongeBob, or in general for that matter. The soundtrack for this movie is somewhat lackluster since all the songs were done by Knod, save for the Teamwork song by Garfunkel and Oates, Thank Gosh It's Monday, and the rap battle sequence. Apparently this film had a lot of executive meddling behind the scenes, a big one being the characters are 3D on the surface as opposed to 2D in the first film. But I feel like despite the hurdles they went through with this movie, it's still a really creative and hilarious film, so I have no qualms giving this film a big ol' 10 out of 10. Oh, we're still on Season 9? Alright. Season 9 trades away the slower-paced dry humor from before with more slapstick-focused gags, making SpongeBob a more expressive show in the process. Ironically, this also happened to be when the show went from being board-driven to script-driven. This is also Paul Tibbitt's last season as showrunner, leading to this season's new showrunning team, Vincent Waller and Mark Ciccarelli. The reason I broke Season 9 into 2 halves is because there was a super-duper uber-long hiatus in the middle of this season, due to the second film being done by the show's current crew at the time, which afterwards went through another big shakeup. Some crew members stayed on, others left, older crew members came back, and obviously newer crew members arrived on the show. This is a good season, but I wouldn't call it the best. It has some of the same pitfalls the first half of Season 9 had, where some of the episodes are pretty good, and other ones are kinda boring. But in this case, probably even more boring. And slapstick gags work better with a faster pace, but this season still kinda has the same slow pace as before. They do continue the first half's trend of more unique plots, but this time, some episodes this season are more story-focused than joke-focused, which some work and some don't. I'll give this season another 8 out of 10 because while this season has some great moments, it also has some growing pains too. And since both halves are an 8 out of 10, I guess Season 9 as a whole is an 8 out of 10 season. Sandy's Nightmare is about Sandy's tree dying, so she makes new fertilizer for it. The fertilizer works, but it also rapidly produces acorns.
I'd say you've certainly got a real nightmare on your hands.
That's not funny!
So Sandy decides to clean up the mess by making nutty butter for people, but eventually, the demand becomes more powerful than the supply. This was a pretty boring episode. I ended up being straight-faced through the whole thing. I also had to watch it twice because after my first watch, I ended up forgetting everything about it.
Peter, is that Sandy's Nightmare? What happens in that episode?
I don't remember.
Patrick and the shaman are easily the funniest parts about this episode. I just happen to find a lot of their jokes pretty funny. And one highlight about the episode is the story that the shaman tells about the sun, star, and the moon, because I really like the direction they went with that. Using SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward to tell a folklore-like story is a really creative way to go about it. Not to mention the art style they went for that scene looks really good. It's a shame this one is as big of a mess as it is, because it's a very interesting premise, and I do like the story they tell here, but it's not really done in a funny way, which is a problem for, a comedy series. Visually, the episode's great, a lot of funny drawings here and there, but despite my positives, I feel like there just wasn't enough to prevent this episode from being boring. Quick side note though, this episode is also the first to have the new widescreen theme song in Canada. More on that later. The sewers of Bikini Bottom is about SpongeBob and Squidward accidentally flushing a safe with the secret formula inside of it, so they head into the sewers to go retrieve it. Meanwhile, a new stadium in Bikini Bottom is being named after the Krusty Krab, but things go awry when it's revealed that the stadium's owner cheaped out on the plumbing, using cardboard instead of metal. 11-minute episodes don't usually do an A and B story. Off the top of my head, Pet Sitter Pat kinda did that, but the SpongeBob plot wasn't as funny as the Patrick one. Here though, I think both plots are pretty funny. The SpongeBob and Squidward plot was really fun since they always worked really well together as a duo. And the sewer location was both visually nice and helped with comedy, and it did some really creative things like a giant sewer snake. The Mr. Krabs plot was great too. Charleston was a great character that bounced off of Krabs and his business partner very well. And you get a lot of great lines from Mr. Krabs.
Relax. That's what my grandma's dentures are made of.
It's also fun to see Charleston take the stadium's plumbing so seriously. My favorite part was how the stories converged at the end, where the massive flood from the Krusty Krab Stadium helps SpongeBob and Squidward escape the sewers, and Charleston defeats the sewer snake that was terrorizing SpongeBob and Squidward earlier. This episode does a lot of stuff in 11 minutes, and I think each minute was fantastic. Given how this is a retrospective, I never really talked about the SpongeBob intro, so I guess now's as good a time as any. The intro is unique, and the fact that it doesn't really tell you what the show's about, but it shows you the general vibe of the show. It's goofy, it's funny, it's weird, but it's also very charming, which are all things you can say about the show itself. The theme itself is very catchy, ironic given how it's supposed to annoy people, and it fits the show pretty well given how it's a sea shanty. In the later part of Season 9, the intro was completely reanimated into widescreen due to the fact that widescreen TVs are, they're common. Look in your living room. And despite some of the changes, like the real life stuff being CGI or some of the stuff being timed differently, it's a very one-to-one recreation. I did notice during the part where SpongeBob gets scrambled and he jumps on the letters and such, it's clear the backgrounds there were painted over screenshots from the original intro. The latter one being the most offending because, it's extremely low quality for one. You could see parts where they painted over it, you could see parts where they flipped the background in order for it to work in widescreen, and you can even see artifacts like the bubbles from the original intro. These problems are minuscule at the end of the day, but truth be told, I'm not going to lose sleep over it, so I guess we can just move on to the next season. Season 10 is a vast improvement of what we got in the second half of Season 9, with this season feeling a bit wackier and more importantly faster paced. And like I said earlier, a faster pace helps out with these slapstick type gags. This season is also firmly comedy focused, which I feel is important to bring up considering how the last season flip-flopped in that regard. I also didn't find any episodes here flat out boring like the last season, which I feel is due to this season being quite consistent in its comedy. This is also the shortest season of the entire show, being 11 episodes. One off from having 10 episodes in your 10th season. But you know what? That's one more episode of love, like a beautiful baby. This is quite the step up from Season 9, so I'm gonna give this season a 9 out of 10. Housewarming is about a small worm named Prickles living inside a SpongeBob, but just for the night. But Prickles soon invites way too many worms to live inside SpongeBob and claims squatters' rights, making life difficult for SpongeBob. This was kind of a so-so episode since it did what I felt like the episode would do. Not in a boring way, it's still a funny episode and all, but more in a predictable way. What I like about SpongeBob is the varying levels of how unpredictable the show can get, but you don't really get that with Housewarming. So in general, it's just not quite interesting. However, the short at the end of the episode, Clam Up, is a huge highlight in my opinion. The short is about Prickle's life before the episode, with him living in a can and being tormented by a nearby clam. This short is already interesting simply because it's purely visual storytelling with no dialogue present. You also get some Looney Tune vibes with this one, which is a no-brainer given how that's one of the show's bigger inspirations. And I also like the switch up they do, where after being trapped cartoonishly, that Cam just goes completely feral and mauls the mailman. Despite not being super long, around 3 minutes I'd say, the short is more interesting than the episode, which is a bit unfortunate, but at least it helps the episode as a whole stand out amongst the crowd. Code Yellow is about Squidward wanting to get plastic surgery on his nose, and SpongeBob also wants to be a supportive friend to Squidward as he prepares for surgery. Squidward suggests that SpongeBob be a candy striper, and SpongeBob puts on the uniform. But after removing the stripes on his uniform, he's confused for a doctor and has to help people around the hospital. The concept of SpongeBob characters pretending to be doctors is something I've always found funny. I found it really funny seeing Patrick be a shitty doctor all the way back in season 1 of the show, so surprise surprise, putting SpongeBob in the same position is gonna get a laugh out of me. SpongeBob here, unlike Patrick, is at least able to help the patients out, and it's done in really funny ways, from him taking out someone's skeleton and putting a display one in place, and him riding Mrs. Puff's iron lung around like a car. But my favorite part is when SpongeBob's tasked with doing Squidward's nose job. They do a lot of great stuff during Squidward's surgery, like magic acts, or just doing a montage of Squidward getting wackier and funnier noses. One of my favorite bits being SpongeBob serving up Squidward's nose as both sushi and an Arby's sandwich. The ending's also great, with SpongeBob apparently needing all 6 of Squidward's limbs to give him a nose slightly better than his old one. Such a great way to end a fantastic episode. Season 11 is an improvement on an improvement, because in this season, they finally fully get into the groove of this new style of SpongeBob. Episode-wise, you get a mix between experimental episodes, like Squid Noir for example, where they parody the detective noir style while looking for Squidward's clarinet, or episodes primarily focused on comedy like Ink Lemonade, which is all about Patrick selling Squidward's ink, and having to scare Squidward for more.
Thank you, Daddy!
Both are great episodes, which this season has up the wazoo. This season tends to both expand on secondary characters like Bubble Bass, who's presented as a basement-dwelling nerd, and tries out new dynamics like the Gal Pals, a friend group consisting of Karen, Sandy, and Mrs. Puff, and eventually Pearl. This is also the start of recurring bits on the show, like Karen the Computer Fairy or the Title Zone for example. And I think that really helps them do a lot more weirder episodes of the show without having to like come up with like an explanation. It's like, you know, it's the Title Zone, it's just gonna be weirder. So after a good while of not giving one of these out, I think season 11 deserves a 10 out of 10. Speaking of good whiles, this is the second time in the video where I also don't have a least favorite, so I'll discuss my second favorite episode instead. Mustard O' Mine is about SpongeBob accidentally using up all of the Krusty Krab's mustard, so Mr. Krabs orders him, Squidward, and even Patrick to go down to the mines and fetch some more mustard before the customers get antsy. I really like the Three Stooges dynamic Squidward, SpongeBob, and Patrick have here, with all 3 of them doing a singular job like in the Three Stooges. Plus, they even have Squidward call them Chowderheads in this episode. And the concept of them mining for condiments is fun because not only is it a cool location for them to explore, they also manage to do a lot of great jokes with them inside the mines, like having SpongeBob and Patrick get mad at finding diamonds and gold, or them just taking the escalators. One of my favorite scenes in this episode is probably the subway scene for how hectic it gets, with Squidward struggling to swipe the card as SpongeBob and Patrick are yelling at him to hurry. It's really funny to me.
Hey, Squidward, you really should watch the closing doors.
It's a fantastic episode, but I do have one problem with it though. There's no relish. Plankton Paranoia is about Mr. Krabs preparing for Plankton to steal the Krabby Patty secret formula, only to find that Plankton ends up being a no-show, which causes Mr. Krabs to get increasingly paranoid over time, thinking that Plankton is up to something. This episode is both hilarious and visually impressive. Not only is this a great subversion of the usual Plankton steals the formula episode, it's just really fun to see how paranoid and crazy Mr. Krabs gets over the course of the episode, to the point where he starts banning everything from pockets, babies, and even his own crew. I also like the fake out at the end being a pretty wholesome party, all things considered. Like, it's obvious they do a fake out, but in my opinion, it contrasts nicely from the scene prior, where Krabs is putting death traps in the Krabby Patties because he thinks everyone everyone's working for Plankton. You also get a lot of great sequences here, like Mr. Krabs seeing Plankton everywhere to the point where he goes completely insane, which you can tell they were inspired by the scene from Squeaky Boots, where Mr. Krabs has a mental breakdown after getting rid of SpongeBob's boots. And hell, they even use the same track in both scenes. The sequence of Krabs taking back all the Krabby Patties and getting maimed to hell and back was also animated really well. You get to see a lot of great drawings and expressions, and it escalates so much in a wonderful way. And even when he wasn't trying to, Plankton still fails to get the Krabby Patty secret formula. You know guys, this episode is a real highlight of the season, I tell you what. Season 12 isn't all that different from 11. In fact, it's probably a downgrade since I find a small number of the episodes here to be rather boring. Which is a shame because besides that, it's another fun season and probably one of the best animated seasons of the show. This season also celebrates the 20th anniversary of SpongeBob with the fantastic Big Birthday Blowout, which did a great job celebrating the series as a whole. This still continues a lot of what season 10 and 11 did, so I'll give this season a 9 out of 10. Hiccup Plague is about two kids who terrorize Bikini Bottom by creating a bubble that causes the worst case of hiccups. And throughout the day, it hops from citizen to citizen, causing chaos to ensue. Truth be told, I forgot this episode existed for quite a bit until I watched through the season, so that's already not a great start. To give the episode some credit, I do really like the idea of going around Bikini Bottom for the episode, as opposed to just sticking with one character for the story, as it offers a bit of variety on the type of jokes they can tell here. Unfortunately, I don't care for most of the jokes. The jokes here range from, oh that's kind of funny, to not great. Only one joke really stuck with me, and it wasn't in a positive way.
Put a pickle under your tongue!
Now, I'm not against callbacks to older episodes. I think it's a cute way to reference the show's history, but this one was just a stinker. Maybe an original joke would be better, but it's not really a particularly funny scene to begin with. All in all, I just didn't really care for this episode a whole lot. SpongeBob and Random Land is about SpongeBob and Squidward making a delivery to Random Land, a world fueled purely on the loony and wacky. Unfortunately for them, no delivery fish has ever escaped Random Land, and that the randomness of the world might be too much for them to bear. Right off the bat, I have to praise this episode's art direction. Random Land itself is mostly based on Kaz's style of art, due to the fact that Kaz has had a hand in deciding some of the backgrounds and characters for this episode. You can definitely see the similarities between Random Land and Kaz's other work like Underworld, since both rely on this nice blend of both cartoony and abstract, as well as having a nice contrast between both simple and detailed drawings. Underworld already looks good, so seeing that type of art painted and animated really amplifies how fantastic the art looks. Kaz is also another one of my favorite writers, so predictably I found this episode really funny, as the humor is really consistent and strong here. This episode feels like a golden ticket to just do as much comedy as they can, and I'd say they took full advantage of it, and made a great episode in the process. Unfortunately, around this time, Stephen Hillenburg sadly passed away from ALS on November 26, 2018. Hillenburg was one of my biggest inspirations when it comes to art and writing, and I remember watching videos of Hillenburg talking about, how him and the crew worked on SpongeBob and stuff, and they really struck a chord with me. And if it wasn't for those types of videos or interviews or commentary tracks, or even SpongeBob in general, I probably wouldn't have as much interest in art or writing or even animation as I do today. And I think it's really cool that a show that's very uniquely Steve's is able to just connect with so many different people across the world. Obviously, I don't really know Hillenburg the same way a crew member on SpongeBob or his close friends or his family would know him. But I wanted to make a segment like this because, despite not knowing who he was personally, he still impacted my life in such a positive way that it wouldn't sit right with me if I didn't include a segment like this in the video. And I just want to say that I think the current crew of SpongeBob has been doing a great job continuing the show after Hillenburg's passing. Because no matter how I might feel about a particular season, episode, or, one of the spin-offs or anything, it still feels like SpongeBob, and that alone shows that this show is in good hands. The The SpongeBob movie Sponge on the Run is about SpongeBob and Patrick on a quest to rescue Gary, after Plankton snail naps him and sends him to King Poseidon. The reason why Plankton did this is due to him learning that SpongeBob is the reason he can never get the secret formula. SpongeBob along the way also tries to get the courage he needs in order to save Gary. In my opinion, this is a beautiful movie. The animation is incredible with the lighting, textures, and all the details adding up in a very pretty way. In fact, so good I've seen some people call the upcoming Search for SquarePants a downgrade in terms of animation, which I don't really like because it's clear both films have different artistic goals. Sponge on the Run's art style is more focused on being a more beautiful and detailed take on the SpongeBob world, while Search for SquarePants is trying to look more in line with the show. You can tell by the sand being green, which none of the 3D animated SpongeBob movies do. The crew of this movie mostly consisted of people from the first 2 seasons of the show, an example being Aaron Springer as co-head of story, as well as series creator and executive producer of the film Stephen Hillenburg, who sadly passed away during production. Hillenburg was able to collaborate with director Tim Hill, and if you've been listening throughout this entire video, you know that Tim Hill is one of the developers behind SpongeBob, and the two worked together to create the story for the film. You even have Tom Kenny saying that Stephen Hillenburg got to see test animation of the film. And I bring this up because this film has faced quite a bit of controversy regarding Hillenburg's involvement, so I wanted to get this out of the way before discussing the story. Yeah, the story isn't as grand as the first, or does a lot of things like the second, but it feels like an episode of the show with some sentimentality thrown in. In the $1 Billion Sketchbook, Tim Hill described the movie as a love letter to Stephen Hillenburg, and that Hillenburg himself is in the film. When I read that and watched the movie over and over again, I felt a click. I realized this wasn't just a funny, campy SpongeBob movie, which it is, don't get me wrong, but it was made to honor such a wonderful person that was able to create something that's able to bring so many different people together. And personally, regardless of this film's quality, I think the crew did a fantastic job honoring Hillenburg in this film. I also noticed that in the $1 Billion Sketchbook, camping is brought up quite a bit. I even mentioned camping trips earlier in this video while talking about SpongeBob's development. The author, Biddle Duke, mentioned Hillenburg often camping and surfing with him and his friends, and it's at one of these campfires, like I said, he showed off the sketches for SpongeBob. And coincidentally, in Sponge on the Run, we're introduced to the summer camp, Camp Coral, where a 9-year-old SpongeBob meets his friends for the first time. Obviously, there's nothing I could find to concretely connect the two, but I feel like the coincidence here is strong enough to make me feel that in some way, the camping trips Hillenburg would take might have had a hand in why this film decided to do Camp Coral. And I do know there's some people that think Camp Coral's involvement in this film is solely just to promote the Camp Coral show. But if that was the case, wouldn't Camp Coral in the film be a lot closer to the show? I feel like it makes more sense to say that the show was made in response to the movie, since that could explain why the show is a lot more different compared to the film.
Yo, what is this bitch tripping about?
Back to talking about the movie, I really like this film's sense of humor. It's a good mix between the mid-season's dry humor mixed with how the humor was in the early seasons. The curtain scene is probably my favorite scene in the movie, with SpongeBob and Patrick mundanely talking about the quality of curtains and curtain rods, unknowingly killing El Diablo in the process.
These curtains are making a strange sound.
I think the curtain rod needs some oil.
Once the rod goes, you're probably better off getting a whole new set of curtains.
The film, while a bit more earnest compared to the first film, still doesn't take itself super seriously. The gang sharing their experiences with SpongeBob at Camp Coral, at the end of the day, was just a ploy to kidnap Gary and all the commotion they were causing. And it was really funny. This film also has one of the sweetest endings to any SpongeBob film, with Bikini Bottom becoming a snail refugee after King Poseidon releases all his kidnapped snails.
Kidding. Looks don't matter. We don't care about little imperfections, or even big ones. Just look at Squidward.
What's that supposed to mean?
And seeing the dedication to Hillenburg at the end with the SpongeBob theme playing in the background, it honestly gets me really emotional. It's one of the few SpongeBob moments I can say makes me cry. And of course, I have to talk about the soundtrack for this film, and it's a lot more varied like the first movie soundtrack. You have Snail of Vale, F is for Friends, It's Always Sunny in Bikini Bottom, and these are songs I liked quite a bit. This film, unlike the first two movies, are completely scored, with the first movie not being really scored, with the second movie using a mix between scores and tracks from the show. They did a good job replicating the Hawaiian-type tracks they do play in the show, as well as the score just being great in general. You also got licensed songs like Livin' La Vida Loca and On the Road Again, and I don't mind them, they fit the scenes they're in pretty well. And frankly, as a SpongeBob fan, I don't really give a shit about licensed music. This film is an easy 10 out of 10 for me because not only is this a funny film, it's also just a great love letter to not only the show, but the guy who created it. We're at the first SpongeBob spin-off, Camp Coral. Development of Camp Coral started in 2018, where Brian Robbins sat down with the SpongeBob crew during the season 12 and 13 pickup meeting. Robbins wanted to do more with the world of SpongeBob, so they discussed. Due to the fact that the in-development third film was to feature Camp Coral, a summer camp all the characters visited as kids, why not make that the show? But due to the fact that the show and film were handled by two different crews, they'd have the show take place a year after the movie scenes, and they'd also have Mr. Krabs buy out the camp, leading for the once amazing summer camp to turn into a more stable Krabby Land. Plus, you get to replace the C's with K's. The show was created by Stephen Hillenburg and developed by SpongeBob writer Luke Brookshire, Mark Ciccarelli, SpongeBob writer Andrew Goodman, Kaz, Mr. Lawrence, and Vincent Waller. Vincent has stated that Hillenburg was able to see Camp Coral be developed, but unfortunately didn't get to see the show in any finished state. But let's go on a lighter note and talk about the show itself. Camp Coral, in a lot of ways, is like the original show, but there's a shift in dynamics and setting. Characters the same age as SpongeBob are 10-year-old campers, characters slightly older are counselors, and characters way older are camp staff. Plankton is a good example of the change in dynamics here because in this show, his main goal is to get enough money to go to college. And instead of working against Mr. Krabs, he works for Mr. Krabs. Plankton doesn't change in terms of character, he's still an antagonist, but the change in dynamics help him stand out more in this show. Pearl is a good change in character because in this show she's a baby. The setting here ranges from typical camp places like cabins or the Krusty Canteen, or SpongeBob places refitted to work at camp like Jelly Meadows. The last thing I want to say here is that this is not SpongeBob for a younger audience. It's the same audience as the main show because you have child SpongeBob getting inside a washing machine and both child SpongeBob and child Patrick playing with blood. So with behind the scenes stuff and more basic details out of the way, let's talk about Camp Coral's first episode, The Jellyfish Kid. The Jellyfish Kid is about SpongeBob wanting to catch his first jellyfish at Camp Coral, with his friends trying to help him in the process. This is an okay introduction to the show. It does a good job introducing the camp, or reintroducing the camp because it's different from Sponge on the Run, but good nonetheless. I do like the opening scene being similar to the first movie. Seeing SpongeBob's dream and then having him start the day does a good job setting up his goal in the episode. And I think they also do a good job showing off the new change in dynamics, like showing who's camp staff, who's a counselor, and who's a camper. The plot is serviceable, but I can't decide if it really needed to be a 22-minute episode or not. Because while the episode does introduce the camp well, the actual jellyfishing plot here kinda drags. Which I feel is a mix between it being paced slowly and the stuff they do with the plot not being super interesting. And I can't fault them too much for the latter, since a pilot's job is to introduce people to what they can expect from the show. But I don't know, I feel like the plot could have been more exciting. This also leads to a subject I've been avoiding up until now, the show's animation. Unlike the main show and the Patrick Star Show, which are 2D animated at a rough draft Korea, Camp Coral is 3D animated by Micros in Bangalore. Now, I get why the show is 3D, Sponge on the Run is 3D, and it's animated by a different branch of Micros, so it makes sense that the show based on that film would be in 3D. And while it does do a good job capturing the world of SpongeBob, the animation quality can range from pretty good to passable. The 3D animation also poses some limitations. You're limited in where they can go, and you're limited in the type of objects you can use. During that scene where SpongeBob pulls things out of his jellyfishing net, in 2D, it could literally be anything, but in 3D, it's limited to the assets they already made. And honestly, I can't blame them for that because it's television 3D, you don't have the biggest budget. This also isn't the funniest episode of the show. Yeah, there's some jokes that are kind of funny, and there's some jokes that kind of aren't. It's not bad, but it is kind of boring. All in all, this isn't the best pilot, but it's fine for what it is. A solid 6 out of 10 in my opinion.
Oh, campers! Come out wherever you are! I have treacle tarts!
Trinkle tarts?
After 12 seasons, we're back at season 1. Well, not really. The pilot did a great job representing the show because a lot of what I said there still applies here. Maybe that 6 out of 10 was too harsh. Episodes in this season range from either being, oh, that's kinda interesting, to boring. And you can tell the crew is passionate about the show the same way they're passionate about the main show, and that really helps with this show still feeling like SpongeBob. Camp Coral also introduces a few new characters to the franchise, 2 of which being Narlene and Nobby Narwhal, voiced by Kate Higgins and Carlos Alazraqui respectively. They're hillbillies that live on the outskirts of Camp Coral, and Narlene will often fill the role of an older sister type character to the campers. Narlene and Nobby also cause quite a bit of trouble at Camp Coral, being the troublemakers they are. They're somewhat interesting characters. The idea of an older sister type figure being a bad influence on SpongeBob is funny on paper, but they didn't really execute it in a way that I found all that funny. Plus, the constant foot jokes they do aren't really funny either. Obviously, I don't think it's fetish stuff, cause you know, I'm not a fucking moron, but those types of jokes just aren't my cup of tea. This show also has a really bad problem of not making you really care about the new campers they introduce here, because the only characters you do care about here are the pre-existing SpongeBob characters. And I know that's a tough feat because the pre-existing cast has had over 25 years of history, but I feel like more could have been done. I'm sorry, but it's just really hard for me to care about someone like Regigild. But the Wisecracking now, they hit the mark with that one. Like the pilot, Camp Coral is a very easy 6 out of 10, because at the end of the day, it's just really inoffensive. Camp Cow is about SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy finding a cow and becoming friends with it, because Patrick stepped in cow shit and got good luck. Gonna rip the band-aid here and say this is the most boring episode of Camp Coral. The plot feels like it goes through the motions. The campers find the cow, they feed it, everyone likes the cow. The cow gets too big and eats more stuff, no one likes the cow anymore. They try to get rid of the cow, and then the cow spills the milk. You also got the subplot of SpongeBob wanting to step in cow shit. Personally, shit jokes aren't the end of the world for me. I view them on the same level as fart jokes. If they're done right, it's funny. If not, then whatever. But this episode takes SpongeBob wanting to step in shit to such an absurd degree that it is kind of amusing. Kinda doing a lot of heavy lifting there. The best part of this episode is probably Squidward, because I find it funny how he really likes the cow just because his parents really hated his clarinet music so much that they gave him a cow toy instead. Regardless, this episode is nothing to write home about. Help Not Wanted is about Patrick's dad Cecil visiting Camp Coral for the day, but Cecil loves the camp so much that he stays the night and soon takes over the camp, earning more respect than any of the camp staff have ever gotten in the process. I haven't talked about the Patrick Star Show yet, we'll get there, trust me, but Cecil, much like most of the Star family, is a character I find very funny, and he brings some good old Patrick Show type weirdness to a show that really needs it. I will say compared to the Patrick Star Show, it does feel a bit more subdued, which I feel like is both due to the existing limitations with Camp Coral and the fact that Camp Coral has a plot structure. Mr. Krabs was also pretty great here too. He has some of the best scenes in this episode, like him busting out his old Navy cannon, or him getting the other staff members to dress up like campers to convince kids to turn on Cecil. It's just a really fun episode, and the Star Family cameo at the end is really nice to see. It's cool to see this show use 2D animation every now and then. Maybe they should have animated the whole show in 2D. It's a pretty good episode though. Season 13 is a very hit or miss season of the show. When it hits you like a brick and you get some really great episodes. But when it misses, it's like if someone threw a ball at you, but they overshot it 40 yards above your head. And you end up with some really boring episodes of the show. So with that being said, Season 13 is a very inconsistent season, which is a first because I never really had a problem like this with any other seasons prior. Because while there were some boring episodes in a season, or a season was just weak in general, there was still a level of consistency there in my opinion. But here, it's just back and forth from good to boring. In fact, some really fantastic episodes get paired with really boring ones. But in my opinion, the good does outweigh the bad, so I'll give Season 13 an 8 out of 10. Sandy Help Us is about Sandy having to go around Bikini Bottom helping people with their problems. But when she comes home, the project she was working on becomes a problem for her. Since I can't rip the band-aid off again, I'm gonna unravel the gauze here and say that this episode is boring. This is the camp cow of the main show. It goes through the motions, it's not very funny, plus you have Narlene here to help Sandy's problem, and guess what? They have to use their feet. Look, this is probably my least favorite episode of SpongeBob, but even still, I wouldn't call this a terrible episode. Because so far through watching SpongeBob, there has never been a moment where I'd go like, this is terrible, this is absolute dog shit, why did they ever think that this was a good idea? Because SpongeBob has just never done anything like that to really warrant that type of reaction out of me. A good example of an episode I find terrible is this one Loud House episode I saw a while back on Hulu Live TV, where a 17-year-old tries to get a 13-year-old to fall in love with her again. Like, that's bad. I don't like that shit, not one bit. That's nasty as hell. And if SpongeBob did make an episode comparable to that, I would not like that episode one bit. But the worst a SpongeBob episode can be to me is just not be funny. And even still, I'm disappointed when an episode isn't funny. Not upset like with this Loud House episode here. Like, I'm sorry if you wanted to see me just get really pissed at a SpongeBob episode, but yeah, I can't. Nothing the show really does ever really gets me to that point. Like, honestly, there's nothing to really make me go like, this is one of the worst SpongeBob episodes I have ever seen, and all the writers behind this episode need to get killed by the Mexican cartel. So what's the moral of this story? I'd sooner watch every boring episode of SpongeBob 50 times over than watch a bad episode of The Loud House. Friendiversary is about SpongeBob celebrating him and Squidward's Friendiversary, but when SpongeBob becomes too much to bear, Squidward goes to erase all of SpongeBob's memories of him, which leads to some unfortunate consequences. This was an amazing episode that does a fantastic job celebrating the SpongeBob and Squidward dynamic. Not only is this episode visually fantastic, it's just extremely funny. Like, Squidward having a mental breakdown is not only a funny scene, it's worded so well, you can really feel Squidward turn into a nervous wreck. There are other moments I really like too. During the scrapbook scene, you got paintings that perfectly capture how Sponge on the Run, Truth or Square, and Help Wanted look. And I love how you can even see Hillenburg's original sketches of the characters on one of the pages. It's really heartwarming. The story here is great too. I like the reason SpongeBob can't forget about Squidward is due to him making the Krusty Krab safe combination one of his memories with him. It's a really funny way to go about it. And obviously, I have to talk about the montage and the ending. The montage is fantastic. I like how it starts with them recreating things they did at the start of the episode, to them recreating really iconic scenes from the earlier seasons. A real deep cut being the lima beans in the car chase from Fools in April. And that's honestly one of my favorite gags in the episode. And the ending where Squidward gets on the sushi maker again, which causes SpongeBob to suddenly get all of his memories back, is both funny and really touching in a way. You can really tell the crew not only love these characters, but the history behind these characters as well. And the stuff they do here makes me kind of emotional as a SpongeBob fan. Please go watch this episode when you can. It's a really great episode. And as a side note, you could probably see what I mean about this season being hit or miss. After Kim Coral, another spin-off was planned, one focusing on the starfish next door, Patrick Star. The show's meant to be weird, especially since it takes place from Patrick's point of view. And given Patrick's less than stellar intelligence, his view of the world isn't exactly realistic. While SpongeBob SquarePants and Camp Coral are considered animated sitcoms, the Patrick Star Show is a variety show. There are episodes based on Patrick's life, his in-universe television show, or whatever crazy things the writers could come up with. The goal of the show is to be as surreal and as funny as possible, even ignoring story structure and continuity just to be funny. SpongeBob was a show that already preferred comedy over continuity, but the Patrick Show breaks continuity like a piggy bank. While Camp Coral focused on the original main cast from the main show, the Patrick Star Show introduces Patrick's family. You have Patrick's dad, Cecil, voiced by Thomas F. Wilson. He's the loving father and breadwinner of the Star household and can never keep down a job. And you have Patrick's mom, Bunny, voiced by Cree Summer. She's the dutiful housewife that obsessively cleans everything, as well as creating inedible meals for her family. And with these two as Patrick's parents, you can tell where he gets his smarts from. There there was controversy about Patrick's parents being redesigned and changed, and if you want my 2 cents on it, they turned 2 characters used only as plot points in their first 2 appearances, and then turned them into actual funny characters with more unique designs. And at this point, they're way more iconic to me than Patrick's old parents. You also have Patrick's little sister, Squidina, voiced by Jill Talley. A big nerd who's the producer of The Patrick Show, and is responsible for making sure everything runs smoothly. No big sister Sam though, she was lost in the surf. And finally, you have Grandpad, voiced by Dennis Snyder, and all he is a cranky old bastard. It's clear Patrick gets his anger issues from Grandpad, as Grandpad is the biggest asshole out of the stars.
Copyright infringement.
When does the show start, mister?
Pirated Patrick paraphernalia. Bootleg balloons. Check out my sweet merch haul.
This show, in a lot of ways, is comparable to, say, Uncle Grandpa, which is a really good show and you should watch it, but it still has that SpongeBob flair to it. Unlike Camp Coral, Stephen Hillenburg had no involvement with this show, but it was developed by the same people who developed Camp Coral. Later on during Season 3, Hillenburg is given a vanity credit as the creator of the show, which I do like, but I wanted to bring this up because I'll get Dum Dum Poo brains saying that if it's a vanity credit here, then it must be for Camp Coral too, which it's not because he worked on that show, but to dumb it down for the Dum Dum Poo brains, vanity credit here, not for Camp Coral. Vanity credit here, not for Camp Coral. Now we can talk about the pilot. Late for Breakfast is about Patrick being late for breakfast, and he searches around the house for food, even doing a cooking show just to get some grub. This is a much better pilot than the Jellyfish Kid, and I think that boils down to the Patrick Star Show just being a more unique show compared to Camp Coral. Despite all the changes Camp Coral did to the main show's formula, it's still very similar to the main show in its tone and how it's written. Meanwhile, the Patrick Star Show, right off the bat, shows you how different it is compared to the main show. Not only by doing different approaches to comedy like the main show, it also just doesn't use the main show cast all that much. Squidward and Plankton only show up briefly, and SpongeBob is only alluded to. It also does a good job setting up the different characters and aspects about the show. We learn about the Star family during the breakfast scene, and we get to see secondary characters like the Darkfishes and Patrick's pet Ouchie. And they do a good job showing both Patrick's family life and his in-universe TV show. We also get to see elements of the variety show aspect through Grandpat's history lesson. This was a funny episode, but definitely not the funniest episode of the show. And I think that's due to the fact that, it's a pilot, it's introducing things, so the gags aren't going to be as top-notch. The night gag they do isn't super funny, but it does show you that the show likes to do random gags, and will repeat them as many times as they want. But to say this episode isn't funny is a lie, because there are bits here that I do find genuinely funny.
The story characters and names portrayed in this production are suspicious, especially mine. No person associated with this show received anything of value, especially me. No one was harmed in the making of the show, except me. Ouch. Thanks for watching.
It just kind of rocks back and forth between being funny and not being that funny to me. Another issue I have with this episode, which is probably just a me problem, is that the characters talk in a way that feels awkward and stilted in some areas.
I have no idea. Do you, Cecil?
So you can see him too, Bunny? Oh, I thought I was the only one.
I'm your grandfather, Grandpat. Must we do this every morning?
This is an issue exclusive to this episode though, since I didn't notice this in any other Season 1 episode. This is a pretty good pilot for the series, but a real weak episode for the season. So despite being a better pilot than Camp Coral, I'm gonna give this episode a 7 out of 10.
I said no hard feelings! I guess you're the head of the house now. Bye.
Season 1 of the Patrick Star Show is a pretty good season overall. It starts out pretty weak with the first few episodes, but over the course of the season, it improves a great deal, and you get some really good episodes as a result. And you also get a lot of variety here, from episodes about Patrick's family, episodes about the Patrick Show, or episodes focused on random concepts like SpongeBob and Patrick going back in time to babysit their favorite superheroes. It's a funny and very consistent season, and I ended up not really having a problem with any of the episodes here. And while I did say the first few episodes episodes were weak, they're still good episodes in their own right. You also get to see different art styles, like stop motion made to look like older horror films, or scenes that look like cartoons from the 1930s. I think this season is a solid 8 out of 10 because while it's a good season overall, it does have some growing pains at the start. Now this is when I move on to my least favorite, but Late for Breakfast unfortunately ended up being my least favorite this season, and I want to reiterate that it's a fine episode, it just happened to be the weakest one in my opinion. But since I already discussed Late for Breakfast, I might as well talk about my second favorite episode this season. X Marks the Pod is about the evil supervillain Man Ray, who finds out that the Star Family house is built on top of his super secret villain lair, containing his secret black hole bomb that he needs to blow up Bikini Bottom with. So he has to break inside in order to complete his evil plan. The idea of having a comic book type supervillain having to deal with dim-witted cartoon characters is a very funny idea. The Star Family is as funny as expected. They have a lot of great gags here and there, but Man Ray is really great here since he plays sort of an Elmer Fudd type role to a bunch of Daffy Ducks. Man Ray is also treated as a straight man as well, since he's not used to dealing with the chaos that is the Star Family. So that adds another layer to how funny he is in this episode. One of my favorite scenes here is probably when Man Ray gets to his lair, and you see a lot of references to not only other SpongeBob things like the movies and comics, but even other superhero properties as well. We also get to see that Man Ray unintentionally killed his sidekick Kid Ray by making him stay put for years. So with that being said, it's a pretty great episode. Mid-season finale is about the Patrick Show celebrating its mid-season finale, you know, like the title. This is a parody of the show Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, a sketch comedy released in the late 1960s. You can easily tell the episode takes a lot of influence from this show, but it also takes a lot of influence from The Muppets, Schoolhouse Rock, Lassie, game shows, Jimmy Durante, and so much more. You can see different art styles, settings, behind-the-scenes drama, romance, and American-based guitarist and singer Bootsy Collins. It's an episode that embodies the spirit of the Patrick Star Show, a show where the crew can take the iconic world and characters of SpongeBob and do whatever the fuck they want with it. It's a crazy episode, it's a funny episode, it's an episode you can tell had a lot of love put into it. The Patrick Show has really gone uphill since the first 3 episodes, and this episode is evidence of that. This segment's magic word is amazing.
Luck be a lady tonight! Cherries again! Someday we're gonna win that sports car!
Starting with the Patterfly effect, Season 1 went from being script-driven to board-driven, as well as getting a nearly new crew entirely, letting the old crew focus their attention on the main show. The last third of Season 1 is an improvement from the first, which is saying a lot because that season was already heading in a good direction. The writing is both tighter and stronger and a lot more faster paced.
I love this mug with all my heart! Or at least what's left of it.
That should be mine! I'm the #1 dad! Now give me that mug!
No, Dad! You're too old to have nice things!
And while the visuals for the first 2/3 of this season are really great, the show being board-driven now I think amplifies that to the upteenth degree. Honestly, I just had a great time with this season. This is easily a 10 out of 10 for me, but since I split up Season 1 in total is probably a 9 out of 10. And since I don't really have a least favorite here, it's second favorite episode time. Blorpsgiving is about Captain Quazar spending the holidays with his sidekick Patron, as Patron and his family are celebrating the namesake holiday. I don't know if I'm in the minority on this one, but I've always liked Captain Quazar and Patron. The mix between the Odd Couple format and sci-fi is really funny to me, and I also like how it's styled after UPA cartoons, so I've always really enjoyed seeing their appearances over the season. Not only is this the first episode fully focused on the two, it's also the first Thanksgiving episode in any SpongeBob media. My favorite thing about this episode is how melodramatic Captain Quazar is, which contrasts nicely with how casual Patron is during the entirety of the episode. Even when the most mundane stuff is happening around him, Quazar still acts and talks like William Shatner.
Patron, I can't take anymore!
But we just got here!
I'm not like you machines! I'm not meant for this cold, metal world! I'm flesh and blood!
Huh?
The murderous wedding stuff was also a fun direction to take this episode in, since not only is it funny to see Quazar ditching his wedding and jump-starting a car like in a horror movie, it also means Quazar was kinda right about everyone being hostile. Well, during weddings at least. It's a very fun episode, and I'll make sure to watch it every November. Bubble Bass Reviews is about Bubble Bass doing an online review of The Patrick Show, which is not favorable in the slightest. This episode is definitely the most well-known episode of The Patrick Star Show, as it's a parody of online cartoon reviewers who dislike cartoons to an unhealthy degree. As a SpongeBob fan, you'll see a lot of cartoon reviewers like these.
You three may want to thank your lucky stars every second of every day that whatever the fuck you sold your souls to was stupid enough to give you your jobs. Because if you lose your jobs writing this trite shit, you'll most likely never work again, not just in television, but in any job. I don't know anyone who would lower themselves so substantially to even reluctantly want your demented, poisoned minds around.
But how's the episode? Well, it's a funny one, and one that understands these videos very well. You have Bubble Bass calling The Patrick Show a crime against humanity, and that everyone involved should be thrown in jail. Which reminds me of the time Mr. Enter called the writers behind the SpongeBob episode Stuck in the Ringer mindless degenerate hacks who are excuses for humanity. Bubble Bass likes My Tiny Seahorses, and Mr. Enter likes My Little Pony. Does this mean Bubble Bass is a stand-in for the Nostalgia Critic? No, it can't be. I mean, he has the outfit and everything, but Doug Walker likes a Pal for Gary. That's based, and that's also going to be in the Pal for Gary video. Gee, I guess we'll never know what YouTuber inspired Bubble Bass's character in this episode. But Bubble Bass in this episode is fantastic regardless. I mean, look how pathetic he is. It's hilarious. I also like how he easily gets scared of Patrick and Squidina, and can't handle it when they in turn make a video harshly criticizing every single thing he does, like what Bubble Bass did to them.
The Patrick Show is the worst show on television. Patrick Star and Squidina are the enemies of the state. Ooh, they make me so angry!
Maybe they could make a sequel where Bubble Bass makes an animated series around growing, I guess? Oh, silly me, I forgot. Only losers work in animation. Maybe he should make it a book instead.
Wait a second.
You know, Campmaster Krabs, you look a little pale.
Well, today is your lucky day!
Our Avion Cosmetics line will change your life forever!
How about a little red for those cheeks?
But I'm already red! No!
Camp Coral Season 2 was more or less the same, what a shock, but I will say the animation here looks a lot more consistently good compared to Season 1. This is also a bit of a sentimental season because this is the last season of Camp Coral, due to the show being a limited series. You know how weird it is to see a SpongeBob show end? For as much as I didn't care for Camp Coral, the fact that it's over kinda makes me sad. I really wanted to see Camp Coral improve and to like Camp Coral on the same level as I do the main show or Patrick Show. But unlike the Patrick Show, this show just never improved. In fact, it just kind of stagnated. But I will say this season is an improvement, just not a big one. So unfortunately, I have to give Camp Coral a 6 out of 10, simply just because it's more or less the same. A Tale of Two Roxies is about the two Roxies from the spooky monster cabin splitting up because they got into a fight or something. Why the fuck should I care about the Roxies? They had 3 supporting roles and 2 cameos before this, and season 1 is 26 episodes. That fucking Jimmy Blobfish kid left more an impression on me, and he was in less episodes. But besides the over-exaggeration, the episode isn't all that bad, it's just really boring. I said this before while talking about season 1, but this show does not do a good job making you care for the new campers they introduce here, which is a big problem here because not only do you have to care about the Roxies, but you also have to care about the fact that the two are fighting and that things are rocky between the two. The best part about this episode is when they do things with the characters you do care about, like SpongeBob, Patrick, Mr. Krabs, or Jimmy Blobfish. Overall, Crabsy the Clown is about Pearl's business expense birthday party, but when the clown Krabs hires is a no-show, Krabs decides to embrace his dramatic past as a clown and become Crabsy the Clown. And unlike Krabby the Clown, Crabsy is really good as a clown, but Crabsy's warm welcome turns into bitter discontent as he keeps the ball rolling despite everyone not really finding the joke funny anymore. This was a pretty funny episode with a lot of back-to-back jokes that I really ended up liking.
And the sword swallower!
Yeah. So I'm actually having second thoughts about that.
Heroic
ruined me! This is the only way I can eat pie now! I'm a monster!
And honestly, this might be one of my favorites from the show. Animation-wise, it has some really great posing, and there's shots that look really expressive. And Crabsy himself is animated very nicely too. They do a good job capturing that wacky clown vibe with them. I also like the switch up they do with the campers, where at first they find Crabsy really funny, but then are quickly very tired of him, or just downright angry with him. That scene of Plankton running from Crabsy's shoe was fantastic. The ending was also really great. Having everyone grill and goad Crabsy into making the Mega Menagerie was a really funny scene, and then afterwards actually seeing said Mega Menagerie was honestly really cool to see. Glad we got to end Camp Coral's time here on a real high note. Season 2 was more or less the same as the last third of Season 1, so spoiler alert, it's a 10 out of 10. But I do want to mention that this season really pushes what standards and practices allow SpongeBob to get away with. You see, SpongeBob is one of the longest running television shows of all time, and is widely adored by the entire world, so sometimes standards and practices like to give SpongeBob quite a bit more freedom than the average cartoon, you know, simply because it's SpongeBob, which in turn applies to the spin-offs as well, which leads to an entire episode where the Star family picnics at a cemetery, desecrates graves, and have one of the main characters get involved. Not to mention they show dead bodies on screen. So in short, this is an amazing season. Tying the Clop Knot is about Patrick going back in time and ruining Bunny and Cecil's wedding. To prevent Bunny from being sent back to Clop Knot, Squidina promises to finish Bunny and Cecil's wedding by sundown. I'm kind of 50-50 on Clop Knot stuff because sometimes I find it funny and sometimes I don't care for it. And this episode is one of the times I don't care for it. It's a perfectly fine episode. In fact, I feel kind of bad making it my least favorite here, but honestly, the Clop Knot stuff here just isn't super funny to me. There are more funny jokes here that I like that aren't related to Clop Knot, especially the ending of the episode, but other than that, I had an alright time with this episode. I'm just kind of indifferent to it. I guess I could say it's the weakest episode of this season, but the weakest episode in this season is like still a strong episode in the grand scheme of the series. Can't really say that about Camp Coral, can I? Chum Bucket List is about Patrick eating what he believes is poisonous chum, so he and SpongeBob set off to complete Patrick's bucket list before he dies. This is probably one of the best episodes in this show, and maybe even the SpongeBob franchise.
What are you, tax collectors? I got your payment right here!
Every character here is top-notch, and I really like SpongeBob and Patrick's dynamic in this episode, because it's kind of like a swap of the main show, because in the main show, Patrick's stupidity is treated as something that can easily be brushed off. But here, it's SpongeBob's concern for Patrick that's brushed off. As an example, you have SpongeBob immediately wanting Patrick to go to the doctor due to Patrick's life being on the line, but Patrick refuses to go to the doctor because it's the last thing he wants to do on his bucket list. The bucket list itself is fun because all the stuff on it ranges from really dangerous stuff like fighting a deadly robot, to funny stuff like singing on Broadway, to even mundane stuff like watching a sunset in the dump. You also get a lot of fourth wall breaks here, like Patrick ripping the storyboards and script of the episode, that Patrick showing the time code to SpongeBob. It's so weird seeing SpongeBob do jokes like these. And of course I have to mention the friendship song made by the amazing Eben Schletter, who also created the hit song Thinking About Homosexuality.
That when people come out proud and hard as anti-homosexual, what they're really trying to say is, I'm gay, sweet Jesus, I'm so gay, I'm queer as queer could ever be.
This episode is a gay old time.
I'm gay. Good Lord, I'm so gay.
This season is a lot like season 13, with it being another hit or miss season. Unlike 13, it misses more than it hits with some of these. This was released during SpongeBob's 25th anniversary, but instead of doing a special like Big Birthday Blowout or Truth or Square, they decided to make sequel episodes to episodes made during the first 3 seasons. Moon's probably my favorite of these because it's the only one that feels like a sequel episode, because the other two, Squidward Box and PL 1413, feel like they're doing their own takes on the original episode. Squidward Box is a pretty good episode all around, even if it does contradict the original episode, which I really don't care. PL 1413 was... I feel like the episode could have been better. This is also a visually inconsistent season, since you'll go back and forth from really great looking episodes to episodes like this. This is an example of them using pose sheets, which are pre-existing drawings they like to slap in an episode instead of doing actual plussing. And honestly, I think they're rather lazy, and I wish the crew didn't use them at all. The show's a lot better about this now. I don't think they show up as often as they did in this season, but you know, I still would rather them use like the model sheet or something, because this SpongeBob right here just doesn't look that great, to be honest. This is unfortunately probably my least favorite season of the show, but even still, I think it deserves a respectable 7 out of 10, simply because there are still episodes here that I really do like. Faux-Chovi is about how after an anchovy lunch rush at the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob is swept up by the anchovies and after a while, turns into a Faux-Chovi. And this Faux-Chovi madness is slowly spreading to everyone in Bikini Bottom. The concept of this episode is a fun one, but not a funny one. I'm kind of 50-50 on the anchovies because sometimes they're funny, and then other times they're just kind of one note. Besides Surface World Pizza, I didn't find a lot of the jokes here to be super funny. I guess the anchovies being scared of pizza is amusing, and I like Gil Doppler, he's cool. The animation was okay. It's not bad, but it's not the best it could have been. It felt kind of slow, all things considered, and I've noticed this with recent seasons, but for every 2 well-animated episodes, you get one that's animated okay. I've seen people say it's because of Rough Draft Korea, but I think that's rather, pardon my French, fucking stupid, because Rough Draft animates every episode of SpongeBob. Both episodes that look fantastic, and episodes that look okay. It's clearly an animation direction issue, and I hope it gets improved on later down the line, because I really want the show to improve. Creepaway Camp is about everyone that used to attend Camp Coral getting letters in the mail for a reunion. But things turn awry when former campers start getting snatched up one by one, never to be seen again. Obviously, this is a crossover between the main show and Camp Coral, with this episode acting as a second finale of sorts. The direction they took in this one is amazing. The idea of parodying camp-related horror movies with Camp Coral is really genius. Visually, it's fantastic. It's animated really well throughout, especially towards the end where it looks damn near like theater quality 2D. They really went all out on how lively and expressive these characters can get. Also, just gonna say this again, this episode is a big reason why Camp Coral should have been 2D. And I'm not saying that 3D's bad, but just look how Camp Coral looks here in like the flashbacks. The backgrounds look colorful and lively, the kid designs look charming, and more importantly, the Wisecracken looks really great. He looks fantastic in 2D and captures that Rodney Dangerfield vibe a lot more than what Camp Coral could do. This is also just a funny episode, just a lot of great gags at the beginning. One of my favorites being the one where they play black and white stock footage back to back.
Well, looks like we're walking back across the bridge.
Oh no! We'll have to use the old tunnel! That's okay! To the hot air balloon field!
You also get a lot of fun horror gags like the Psycho reference with Bubble Bass, and then just having the characters bring up horror movie tropes and trying to avoid them in hopes of not getting captured. And they do this great gag with the trawlers where they just intentionally break a rule just to get captured. Also, the twist of Elwood being behind all this is a really great twist, all things considered. Not only does this fit with the actual Camp Coral finale, with Elwood actually staying behind, but then they imply that Elwood did something to the other campers before going to kidnap SpongeBob. And seeing a terrified SpongeBob begging not to be killed, and then him seeing his friends covered in what he thinks is blood, is both bonkers and great at the same time. You also get a lot of references to Camp Coral throughout the episode, especially the end party that's filled with callbacks to episodes like What About Me, Brejahild, and so much more. You could tell with this special that the crew really loved Camp Coral, and honestly, it makes me appreciate Camp Coral just a little bit more. Was Camp Coral the best thing to come out of SpongeBob? No, but this episode sure is. And honestly, it's one of the best ways to send off any SpongeBob show. Unfortunately, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that this episode was dedicated to Peter Bennett, who was a longtime SpongeBob art director and background painter who has worked on the show since 1999. A lot of his work on SpongeBob, as well as his personal paintings, are very well done, and it's really sad to know that he's no longer with us. Also, before I go into season 15, originally season 14 and 15 were meant to be one season, but Nickelodeon decided to cut every future SpongeBob season into two. I'm having season 14 and 15 still be split up in this video because 1, I feel like having them together would confuse people who aren't aware of this fact, and 2, I actually separate the seasons myself for one particular reason, which you'll find out right now. This season is a massive improvement from the last two, which is weird because production-wise, this is still season 14. It's a lot closer to season 12 in terms of quality, where a boring episode is here or there and not like a good chunk of the season. But even still, I found a lot of these episodes to be pretty great. It still has some of the pitfalls from the last two seasons, like the pose sheets creeping up and whatnot, but season 15 is a really easy 9 out of 10 in my book, and I really ended up enjoying this season despite some of the flaws it has. Also, if you didn't get it, the quality difference is why I split the seasons. Captain Quazar, the next iteration, is about SpongeBob, Squidina, and Patrick learning about a brand new Captain Quazar fan club. Unfortunately, this club is ran by Bubble Bass, a staunch fan of the rebooted Captain Quazar. Not liking the reboot, Squidina and SpongeBob decide to make their own fan club. Like I said before, I find Captain Quazar and Patron to be funny characters, so I ended up liking the Quazar bits here, both the original and the rebooted ones. Everything else, though, was okay. It wasn't super funny, but it was alright. I think they kinda handicapped themselves here by having the main pair here be SpongeBob and Squidina and not SpongeBob and Patrick. I do appreciate the fact that they're doing different character dynamics, but SpongeBob and Squidina didn't bounce off each other super well. I did notice some similarities between this episode and Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 6, the motion picture, where the original superheroes are old as hell and the new ones are just actors. That's where the similarities end though, but that got me thinking, if they could use Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, this definitely would have been a Mermaid Man episode. The idea of using Quazar and Patron in the same vein as Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy is an interesting idea, but I feel like that needs a lot more workshopping than what this episode did, to be frank, because this is a very meh episode of the season. Firehouse Bob is about SpongeBob becoming a volunteer firefighter after Old Man Walker, Bikini Bottom's best firefighter, gets injured on the job. I don't care, I'm ripping off the band-aid again. This is one of the best episodes of the show, possibly on the same level as The Lost Mattress. The pacing is fast, and they do a good job making each scene be as funny as can be. And the visuals are outstanding and honestly makes this one of the best looking episodes of the show. A good example of both of these things is the mystery pole scene, since not only is SpongeBob very well animated there, you can tell by the footage I'm showing you that it's a very hilarious scene, with them just using and plastering as much stock footage from Getty Images as they can for shits and giggles. Sweet victory, eat your heart out. The plot, while simple, is also great. You get to see SpongeBob, Squidward, and Patrick train, you get to see them go out as firefighters, and it ends with them nearly saving the day, but only making things get worse. This episode's supervising director was Ian Vasquez, and he and his team have made some of my favorite episodes in the past 3 seasons, so I thought I'd give them some praise. And Kaz gets some praise too, because he wrote the episode. And Fred Osmond gets some praise, because he's the storyboard director. There's just so many things I love about this episode, and it makes me hope we can get more episodes like this in the future.
Ooh, a hitchhiker. He looks kinda shifty. We always pick up hitchhikers, son. They have the best conspiracy theories.
I ended up finding season 3 here a very slight dip in quality compared to season 2. And I say that because there were some episodes this season I felt were kinda boring. Other than that, there's not a whole lot I could say here that doesn't already apply to season 2, so I'll give this season a 9 out of 10 and move on. Thanks But No Thanksgiving is about Bunny taking the stars to visit her family up in Knod so they can spend Thanksgiving with them. It's more Knod stuff, and I already said I was 50-50 on it, and judging by its place in the video, you can tell what 50 we're on. It's kind of a boring episode. I didn't care for a lot of the jokes they had here. Agnes wasn't a super funny character. She had a joke or two I liked. I don't know, she didn't really click with me. She kinda sounds like my doctor, so, I guess that's funny, but that's not really the episode's doing. The joke about the stepdads being turned into furniture was amusing, but the rest of the extended family here aren't super funny. The cousins are just Patrick and Squidina, but Klopnodian, so it's very one note. Esmeralda is kinda funny because she tries to one-up Bunny by showing how great her life is, but it's revealed that she's a pathetic liar. Cecil trying to impress Agnes is about as funny as Agnes herself, which isn't super funny throughout, but I did find the ending to be kinda humorous. Grandpa was good too, he's the diamond in this episode, but I can't imagine watching this one during Thanksgiving times. Maybe they should have taken a page out of Drusselstein's book and done a DMV episode.
I think I did okay.
The Fun Bucket is about after nearly dying, Patrick wants to celebrate his birthday at the Fun Bucket, a Chuck E. Cheese type arcade. But after a few coinky-dinks, the Chum Bucket ends up accidentally looking like the Fun Bucket. So now Plankton and Karen have to entertain the whole Star family so they can get some money. The Chum Bucket isn't that much different from how Chuck E. Cheese is nowadays. Maybe even better because at least Plankton can afford a camera. But like the name implies, this is a very fun episode. I really like the way they treat stuff at the Chum Bucket like Chuck E. Cheese, like Karen being an arcade machine, Plankton making pizza out of Chum, all the dangerous stuff in the Chum Bucket lab being treated as games and rides, and Grandpa thinking the toilets are slot machines, which to be fair isn't too far off from real life. And who could forget about the giant killer robot and Plankton singing Happy Birthday? Makes Sweet Victory look like a nursery rhyme, 2 for 2 on that one. I think the climax of this episode is great. Having Plankton force the stars to steal the Krabby Patty's secret formula to pay off their tab is a funny concept, and it's even funnier seeing Patrick nonchalantly steal the formula with little to no effort. It's a very funny bucket episode, am I right? Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie, is about all of Bikini Bottom being snatched up by the company Sandy works for, Boots.
Swiper ain't the f***ing bad guy! It's Boots, bitch ass!
So SpongeBob and Sandy head to Texas in order to save their friends, eventually meeting Sandy's family on the way. And we soon learn that Bikini Bottom was stolen for more commercial reasons than expected. Unfortunately, this is probably my least favorite SpongeBob movie, but I feel like the Sandy movie is overhated by most people. In terms of quality, I'd say it's above Camp Coral. And I will say visually, this is a really nice looking movie made for streaming. The writing here is funny sometimes and kinda wonky in other places. As for some of the negatives I have with the writing, they try to set up the fact that Sandy's family wants her to stay with them in Texas but never do anything with it. SpongeBob here is treated more as Sandy's sidekick instead of an equal, which I don't care for, but he is funny in the film so I don't mind it a whole lot.
And all my streaming videos on demand, I can't demand them anymore!
Everyone is upset with Sandy after it's revealed that her research was used to capture them, even though it's clear Sandy didn't know it'd be used like that to begin with, and then that's kinda dropped too. Sandy's family here, save for Randy, isn't particularly funny, and kind of feels generic in some spots. I feel like there could have been more of an effort to make them more unique rather than just generic dysfunctional family. Like the Star family, for example, is a surreal wacky parody of the nuclear family, and they do little things to make the characters be more unique beyond that. Randy is the only member of the family I like because while he's obviously a pretty boy and fills the older brother role quite well, he's also a criminal that's wanted by the police, which makes him both stand out and funny as well. Phoebe and Kyle are also not super funny, but they do make jokes here and there that I did kind of find funny. And Sandy herself isn't that funny either, which I kind of get because she's treated more like the straight man in some episodes of the show. But if SpongeBob can be a funny protagonist in his movies, why can't Sandy be just as funny in her own movie? As for the things I did like about this movie, SpongeBob and the rest of Bikini Bottom were on point and are easily the funniest aspects of the movie. I like Squidward being overdramatic about breathing air, Mr. Krabs calling all the humans demons or witches.
It's some kind of unholy simulacrum! Put us back in the water, you land-loving demons!
and SpongeBob innocently calling an angry raccoon a kitty cat. I also like Tsunami, and I thought she was a pretty funny villain, all things considered. Her plan to kidnap all of Bikini Bottom, clone them, make them indestructible, and then sell them to children does a funny job poking at SpongeBob's popularity. And the fact that her motivation behind all of this is because she unintentionally killed sea animals by kidnapping them and hugging them is quite funny, and it being told as a George Lopez type flashback makes it even funnier in my opinion. I also like how she just instantly stops being evil as soon as her head gets lodged in a fish. It reminds me of second dimension Doofenshmirtz from Phineas and Ferb Across the Second Dimension, and how he instantly stops being evil as soon as he gets Choo Choo back.
Oh, heart melting. Backstory resolving. Evilness diminishing.
Now let's talk about the animation. While I said that the film looked good visually, it's weirdly animated. There are some shots and scenes where the characters do look good, and then there's a lot of scenes where the characters look kind of off. Characters like Mr. Krabs, Plankton, and Patrick got the short end of the stick in this movie. The soundtrack to this movie isn't bad, but it's easily the least memorable soundtrack out of any SpongeBob movie. If I had to listen to a song on my own, it'd probably be She Makes Waves. While I do think this is an overhated movie, it's still not the best SpongeBob movie, but I feel like it's a decent 7 out of 10 movie. Plankton Movie is about after another failed attempt to steal the Krabby Patty secret formula, Plankton's selfish nature rears its ugly head as Karen decides to split from Plankton and take over the world herself. So now it's up to Plankton and SpongeBob to both save the world and fix Plankton and Karen's dying marriage. This is a very good SpongeBob movie. I mean Plankton movie. Visually, the film is kinda weird. It's animated very well, but the actual rendering of said animation goes from either really good, especially when the Karen mech is attacking people on the surface, to near unfinished in some cases, like the start of the movie. One thing about the animation I noticed is with SpongeBob, where he'll go back and forth from having no colored holes to green colored holes. This is probably a side effect of having different studios work on the animation, which Sandy Movie also did, but it feels somewhat more drastic here. There are also scenes where they changed the art style of the movie too, and they all look fantastic. You got cel-shaded 3D, 2D reminiscent of 1930s animation, and the somewhat gross and trippy looking empathy chip scene. Now the Plankton movie is also a musical as well, and all the songs here are honestly really great. They do a good job advancing the plot, explaining motivations, telling stories, or just sounding good in general, which they all do to be fair. The story is also really great, and while you do know it's going to revert back to the status quo at the end, it's really gripping to see how Plankton and Karen will get back together, and you can really feel their relationship deteriorating up until Plankton makes things right and they become as strong a couple as ever. Plankton is also just a funny main character here.
Go ahead and laugh. We're majoring in world domination, and when we're done, we will destroy you all! See you at the holidays!
Goodbye, son!
Unlike Sandy in her movie, Plankton actually is allowed to be just as funny as SpongeBob, who in this movie actually feels more equal to Plankton in this film. Obviously, Plankton does take more precedence over SpongeBob, it's a Plankton movie after all, and SpongeBob is technically still a sidekick, but I don't know, it's just handled a lot better than saving Bikini Bottom. Karen also makes for a great antagonist as well. Plankton and Karen are both equally evil, but Plankton is impulsive, weak, and impatient, which Karen isn't. So she's easily able to take over and plunge Bikini Bottom into ruins. And the film, predictably, is a very funny movie.
You did this! You! This is all your fault!
No, it's not.
You got Krabs trying to make an army that quickly disbands, you got the Gal Pals, which are a pretty fun dynamic, Patrick being an idiot, and of course you have SpongeBob and Plankton in an Abbott and Costello type relationship. Mr. Lawrence was one of the writers on this film and created the general story, and I think it's rather cool he got to write a SpongeBob movie with the characters he helped develop over time. Because like I said during season 4, Plankton and Karen weren't meant to be main characters, but Mr. Lawrence was able to find a way to put them in episodes and eventually get them promoted to main character status. So if it wasn't for Mr. Lawrence, we wouldn't have so many great Plankton episodes, much less a Plankton movie. So I'm happy to say that I give Plankton the movie a 10 out of 10. SpongeBob and Patrick's timeline twist-up is about the duo taking a trip down memory lane, but they soon discover that Patrick's family is taking SpongeBob's place in the past, so the two find Patrick's old time closet and fix the first season of SpongeBob SquarePants. This episode is a crossover between the main show and the Patrick Star Show, and I like the idea of the Star family messing with the episodes they end up in, rather than them doing the predictable thing and have SpongeBob and Patrick travel after them and then take them back to the present. It lends itself really well to the Patrick Show's sense of humor, as well as just being a funnier way of doing things completely.
Hey, it's the paper boy! I'm not your paper boy anymore. To me, you'll always be my paper boy. Paper boy!
It's funny seeing the Patrick Star Show's sense of humor clash with season 1 of SpongeBob, since they're tonally different from one another. Squidina's segment, however, isn't the funniest out of the four. I feel like it would have been better if she just filmed Rock Bottom for the whole thing, instead of like derailing it so she could prank people with some Rock Bottomites. Cecil's segment is great since it explores the idea of the ripped pants joke never going stale, which is quite basic on paper, but they take it to such an extreme that I find it funny. You have Cecil performing it at comedy clubs to jumping the gun and making it become a fashion statement, and it makes it even more funny when it ends with Cecil ripping himself in half, calling it the ultimate rip.
Well, what did you think?
I also like Bunny's segment too, with her becoming King Neptune's fry cook and babying Neptune after he fakes being sick, and through a series of events, becomes a better ruler than Neptune. I like how they reincorporated the challenge scene from the original, and did so in a way that included the wisecracking, which, you know, that's a plus already.
This is what I get for playing hooky from work. Huh, tastes like chicken. A la king.
I also like how this implies that children died during the events of Neptune's spatula. Grandpat's segment in the episode is a show stealer, because after the anchovies storm in, he just quits. And then later, hijacks Plankton's plan to steal the Krabby Patty's secret formula, and is able to take over the world with the Krabby Patty. And while Grandpat's segment is easily the best and funniest part of the episode, the ending did something that I really loved. Before going back in time to prevent Grandpat from doing all that nonsense, SpongeBob travels back in time and buys the hydrodynamic spatula. He then teleports to his past self and gives him the spatula and the iconic Krusty Krab hat, and then you have this really amazing scene where the present-day SpongeBob is able to give his past self the speech he needs in order to get the job at the Krusty Krab. And you know, after they get Grandpat and he's being a cranky old bastard, SpongeBob and Patrick stay behind a bit and watch the past SpongeBob cook up all those Krabby Patties for the anchovies. And honestly, this is a really sweet and a very amazing scene to see in a SpongeBob episode. Because in my opinion, it shows how far SpongeBob has come as a character. He went from the guy needing a pep talk to the guy that gives them out. It's a very heartwarming scene in my opinion, especially in an episode so focused on comedy. Not only is this an amazing crossover between two great shows, it's also just a fantastic episode of SpongeBob SquarePants that celebrates the show's roots. So despite like Squidina's segment not being the funniest, or characters in the past not looking like season 1 in some instances, or the timing being worse in some spots compared to the original episode, I believe this episode without a doubt is a 10 out of 10. Well, I did it. I went over every season, spin-off, movie, and select production tidbits. Not the musical though, not really interested in seeing that one. I might have been a bit too positive on this show, but that's just because SpongeBob is one of my favorite shows. Besides, even if I was too positive, just let me have this. You have like 500 videos on this site calling SpongeBob dog shit. You'll get your fill, trust me. As a kid, I've always been told this and that about SpongeBob, like yada yada, fell off, yada yada, got back on his feet, yada yada. And as a little dumb baby on this site, I kinda took that all at face value and adopted their beliefs instead of making my own. And since then, I've gotten smarter and know not to do that type of thing anymore. And I kinda want the takeaway from this video to be, don't parrot other people's opinions. Watch the show for yourself and come to your own conclusion. If you don't like SpongeBob, that's great. If you do like SpongeBob, that's great. And I hope you guys learned a little bit more about SpongeBob here, because I know stuff regarding Sponge on the Run and Camp Coral's development is prone to misinformation. No thanks to some people,
but Fartsmacker, he apologized.
Yeah, well... But I want to thank you guys for sticking around to the very end and hearing my voice talk about SpongeBob. So I guess I'll see you guys the next time I decide to make a video. Bye-bye.